Chapter 706. Then he heard the news that the West Gate had been bombed. At that moment, nothing could extinguish Gong Dai's anger. Palace, palace, palace. The sky was dark. At this time, Gong Dai stood on the chaotic West Gate. Looking at the traces on the ground covered by snow, he gritted his teeth. Did she know that she was pregnant? Did she know that he was worried about her? Did she know? He was also afraid. In the end, his bitterness and anger were no match for his worry. He gathered all the soldiers stationed at the West Gate to ask, but because the situation at that time was too shocking, no one noticed which direction the princess went. Instead, when they talked about other things, everyone talked about it, and it was very interesting. For example, when the princess saw that the situation was critical, she made a prompt decision to blow up the West Gate, blocking the hundreds of mad bulls outside. For example, the princess was as fast as lightning. Everywhere she went, she would plant bombs and then quickly leave, as if the explosions were chasing after her. She was able to do what she was doing steadily. But Gong Dai's face was getting darker and darker. She actually did such a dangerous thing behind his back? What if she was hit by a rock? What if she was hit by a bomb? Did she even realize that she was pregnant? At this time, Lo Qi and Luo Xiaoqi knelt down obediently. Gong Dai knew that it was useless to vent his anger because they couldn't stop the royal sister, let alone stop her from doing anything. But this time, Gong Dai was really angry. After you find the royal sister, you will receive 100 strokes of the military rod. The cold voice made the two tremble. Yes, thank you, Your Highness. This was already a very light punishment, but it would still take away half of their lives. Right now, it was more important to find the princess. At this time, the palace had settled down. Kim Yun hurried out of the palace. After comforting the people in the city, he also went to the West Gate. But as soon as he arrived, Gong Dai tightly grabbed his collar. You promised this, Prince. You said you would take good care of royal sister. Gong Dai's black robes and long hair fluttered without any wind. His overflowing killing intent prevented anyone from approaching him. They could only watch as he grabbed the Yuheng arch. Kim Yun couldn't catch his breath as he stammered. We will definitely find her. A trace of coldness flashed through Gong Dai's dark eyes. He didn't have the time to wait for Kim Yun. He just said coldly, since you are incompetent, don't blame me for using my own method. He let go of Kim Yun, turned around and ordered coldly, drag him up. After Gong Dai finished speaking, someone went to bring the two manipulators. Someone brought a chair over for the regent to sit down. He then stood at the West Gate and interrogated the prisoners. Many people heard that the bad guys had been caught and were being interrogated. The emperor was also there, so they gathered their courage and came over to take a look. However, they saw two thin and weak people being dragged over. One was naturally Yuheng's Empress Dowager. The other was an ordinary-looking thin and weak man that Gong Dai had caught at the East Gate. They were all caught by Gong Dai, so they feared Gong Dai from the bottom of their hearts, especially the old woman. She trembled as she knelt in front of Gong Dai and Kim Yun. She didn't care about how many people were watching and begged in a low voice. Yun, it's Imperial Grandmother who shouldn't have done this. I've been blinded by lard. Let me go, Yun. Kim Yun stood at the side and didn't say a word. Immerse's disappearance was obviously due to her chasing after Si Wuyan. However, Yuheng was so big. If they didn't know where to go, wouldn't it be like looking for a needle in a haystack? Once he thought that Immerse might have fallen into the enemy's hands, he felt anxious. He looked at the old woman who was crying with snot and tears in front of him without sympathy, only disgust. He didn't care if he would be criticized by others for doing this. He silently agreed with Gong Dai's actions. Gong Dai sat there silently. At this time, he had to calm down and not panic. Si Wuyan's disappearance and the side palace gate were lost. It could be seen that the enemy didn't only send these two people who could control the poison people. There was also another person who could restrain Si Wuyan. From the many soldiers who had collapsed on the ground, it must be Dong Wani without a doubt. And after careful analysis, he would know that the enemy had a series of plans. They deliberately deceived the royal sister and used the royal sister's mouth to lure the tiger away from the mountain. They also deliberately delayed him, causing chaos in the palace. It could be said that Kim Yoon, Si Woo-yen, and the royal sister were the enemy's targets. And the people who could come up with such a plan were definitely not Snow or Xue Qianzhou. Once he thought of this, he was even more worried about the royal sister's safety. Those poisons and goo were impossible to guard against. He slowly got up and walked towards the two people step by step. Actually, they weren't tied up. But at this time, these two people were kneeling in front of Gong Dai. They didn't dare to have the slightest bit of trouble. That terrifying pressure was like looking up at a tall mountain to them. It was like a giant's existence. It seemed that any small movements they made would be easily extinguished by the regent. "Where is your nest?" Gong Dai looked down from above. That voice that contained pressure made everyone's heart tremble. The man didn't say anything. Instead, it was the old woman who trembled. She didn't dare to lie and just cried. "I don't know, Your Highness. I don't know anything." "You don't know anything, and you're being used so thoroughly. You might as well die." His thin lips calmly spat out the word, "die." Gong Dai just waved his sleeve. In the next second, the old woman's head fell to the ground. She didn't even know how she died. This kind of disgusting person, it wasn't worth it for him to personally kill. But Gong Dai's anger couldn't be quelled. Only blood could slightly vent it. The blood splashed on the man next to him. He trembled violently. Only now did he know what kind of enemy he was facing. It was a giant that could pinch him to death with a finger. I'll ask again. Although there were many people around, they were all subdued by Gong Dai's murderous aura. So in front of the ruins of the West City, no one dared to speak. Only the crackling of the flames and the sound of the headless corpse on the ground bleeding could be heard. It made people's hearts stop beating. "Where is your lair?" Gong Dai's cold voice seemed to demand a life. He didn't believe that so many forces were formed in a few months. They had been lurking for a long time. Naturally, they had a nest. They were just waiting for the day when their conspiracy succeeded, and they would completely capture Yuheng. That thin and weak man looked at Gong Dai in horror and swallowed his saliva fiercely. Under the huge pressure, he actually forgot that he still had the holy stone and heart's love goo in his body. He only heard him trembling as he said the word miasma. Suddenly, his eyes widened as if he had seen a ghost. He clutched his chest and twitched violently on the ground a few times. Then, he died. Before he died with his eyes open. The heart's love goo pierced through his heart. Everyone was surprised. The bad guy who caused the panic was actually so weak and died. Chapter 707. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and asked his men to carry the body away in annoyance. Then he turned to question Kim Yoon. "Is there a place with the word miasma around here?" As he said that, he added with a cold face, "The environment is dark. Because they want to raise goo, there are few people here. Because they have been hiding for a long time, no one has discovered them. Perhaps it is a forest area where it is convenient to obtain materials." After listening to Gong Dai's analysis, Kim Yoon only had one answer in his heart. Miasma Cloud Forest is the only place that fits the criteria. Gong Dai narrowed his eyes and looked at the dark night in the distance and suddenly laughed. He only hoped that those people who kidnapped the royal sister would have the awareness to bear his anger. When they alighted from the carriage, because Gong Yimo could not walk, the coachman carried Gong Yimo on his back. Si Woo-yen was also carried by someone. They walked step by step to the underground. They did not expect that there would be a naturally formed karst cave underground. Gong Yimo narrowed her eyes. In this case, even if Gong Dai came, it would be difficult for him to find this place. After all, this was a forest and it was night time. It seemed that they could only rely on themselves. However, after alighting from the carriage, Gong Yimo still left a mark. If Gong Dai came, he would definitely find it. The karst cave was deep underground and twisted. If one did not live here for a long time, it would be easy to get lost. There were many people in the cave, but each of them was expressionless and did their own things. They did not even look at them. Gradually, Gong Yimo smelled a rotten smell. She turned her head, and under the light of the torch, she saw a pit filled with corpses. On the corpses, there were strange insects twisting around. It was not hard to imagine that these were people who were used for experiments. Not only were they persecuted to death, their corpses also became a hotbed for Dong Luani to raise insects. Gong Yimo secretly took in everything and her heart was burning with anger. However, Si Wuyin was someone who could not hold it in. Which, you are still the same as before, not treating human lives as your own. Aren't you afraid that you'll die in such a miserable state? Dong Luani glanced at the pile of corpses and chuckled. She spoke in a disdainful manner. So few people? If it weren't for their cowardice and their refusal to capture more people, I wouldn't have needed to modify the goo poison. Si Wuyan sneered. You haven't changed at all. No wonder Shang Mingxi refused to come even though he knew he might see you. He really feels disgusted when he sees you. Shang Mingxi's name gave Dong Luani much more stimulation than Guanzai Jin's. Her face instantly turned green. In the firelight, she looked like a female ghost. A gloomy voice came faintly. Don't worry. When I have power in my hands, all the pain I'm going through now will be inflicted on all of you. Gong Yimo remained silent. Si Wuyin had given her the antidote for the bone-softening powder long ago. It was just that he saw Dong Luani searching her body but did not find it and thought she had dropped it. That was why he was so anxious. But in reality, with her strength, if there were no accidents, these people were not her opponent. However, she would not act rashly. She still wanted to probe more about the enemy. For example, she wanted to see the mastermind hiding in Yuheng. Very soon, they arrived. In a huge karst cave, there was a stone-carved chair. A person was sitting on the chair surrounded by golden dragons. The surroundings were inlaid with night pearls. This was nothing more than the most ironic thing. A person who loved luxury and complexity could only hide below and dream of becoming an emperor. Gong Yimo was a little disappointed because that person was definitely not the mastermind. Xue Sei, after Gong Yimo was put down, she fell to the ground. However, her expression was gloomy and her cold voice reverberated in the karst cave, causing Xue Sei to be shocked. Why did you bring her back? If not for the fact that Gong Yimo did not look right, Xue Sei would have run away. He was not Gong Yimo's opponent. He could only fight after going berserk. Dong Luani looked down on Xue Sei. Don't worry, I have already searched her body. She was poisoned by the bone-softening powder. She can't kill you. Only then did Xue Sei calm down and sit on the dragon throne. However, a person behind him stepped forward. That person did not trust Dong Luani and only felt relieved after checking her pulse. Gong Yimo carefully sized up the other party's face and found a long scar on his face. It was a face she had never seen before. His face was a little pale. Perhaps it was related to living underground. Seeing that scarred face nodding, Xue Sei smiled. Gong Yimo, you also have a day like this? Gong Yimo smiled lightly. I can't compare to you. Even in your dreams, you want to revive your country. Now, it seems like you have really become an emperor. Is this the rat country? Xue Sei was stunned and immediately became furious. He was actually ridiculed by a little lass. Gong Yimo sneered lightly. Sometimes I am really glad that I am not like you. Otherwise, I would be so stupid. I might as well not have been born. Only then did Xue Sei know that Gong Yimo knew his identity. He gritted his teeth and said, Who told you? Gong Yimo shrugged. No one. I guessed. Xue Sei's expression changed when he heard that. In the end, he smiled slowly. Like me. Of course you won't be like me. Who knows if you are the child of that strange stone or a human? Your mother eats stone powder every day and sleeps on the stone. Who knows if you are a human or not? Gong Yimo sneered. I would rather be born from a stone. Xue Sei was enraged again. It was fine that his mother did not like him, but Gong Yimo also had a disdainful attitude towards him. Why? He did not want to drag it any longer. He smiled sinisterly. Since you are here, to prevent any more trouble, be one of us. As he said that, he also wanted to force Gong Yimo to take the medicine. Looking at the pill in front of her, Dong Luani was somewhat unconvinced. But in the end, she still crossed her arms and watched by the side. After all, she had something more important in her arms. Gong Yimo suddenly asked, Before I take it, can I know whose body this mother worm is in? Shuesei raised his eyebrows. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by that scarred face. You don't need to know. Just eat it. Gong Yimo saw that this person was very wary and helplessly stretched out her hand. Now that I am meat on the chopping block, I will just eat it. As she said that, in front of everyone, she took the pill from Shuesei's hand with great effort. But in the blink of an eye, she swapped it for Si Wuyan's antidote and really ate it. Everyone saw it clearly. Shuesei saw her neck move and was about to say that she was very tactful. But in the next second, that scarred face suddenly said, no, she did not eat it. In an instant, everyone began to move. Shuesei cherished his life. In the next second, he hid far away. As for Dong Wani, seeing the chaotic situation, she was afraid and wanted to escape. But that coachman shouted, she has it in her arms. That scarred face was slightly stunned. Send someone to chase after her. Gong Yimo immediately slapped the antidote into Si Wuyan's mouth and blocked him behind her. She smiled at scarred face. So the mother worm is in your body. Otherwise, he would not have sensed that she did not eat it so quickly. Chapter 708. The commotion here had alerted the people outside. Earlier on, those people were still indifferent towards the outsiders, but now, all of them had appeared around the cave with sinister expressions, blocking all directions. Hearing Gong Yimo's words, Scarface could not deny it, but seeing Gong Yimo's gradually smooth movements, his face darkened. You have the antidote? He did not dare to believe it. He had already searched her body. Gong Yimo smiled as she patted Si Wuyan's shoulder. He's Dong Wani's favorite disciple after all. What does Dong Wani know that he doesn't know? Scarface looked at her dangerously and suddenly said, do it. Once he said that, Snow instantly went into a berserk state. The goo poison in his hands was also modified, allowing him to stay in a berserk state for a longer period of time, but the side effect was that it would make him extremely battle-hungry. His blood-red eyes stared at Gong Yimo, and the other people in the cave surrounded her, wanting to trap her here. Because Si Wuyan's things had also been searched by Dong Wani, in a moment of desperation, Gong Yimo gave Si Wuyan a few bags of things. Si Wuyan knew that it was the poison that he had given her to protect herself in the past. He could not help but have the same question in his heart. Where did she hide it? At this moment, Snow had already attacked. Gong Yimo's body was like lightning, protecting Si Wuyan as they retreated and guarding against other people's sneak attacks. A hidden sword slid out from her sleeve. This scene made Scarface even more shocked. If the antidote was too small, saying that she hid it was still acceptable. But if something like a sword could be hidden, then it did not make sense. What exactly do you have on you? You can hide things? Scarface's words made Gong Yimo shocked. She did not expect this person to be so smart. She did not know if he was the mastermind behind this, but it did not matter. She swung her sword, and not only did she force Snow to retreat, she also killed two people who were blocking the way. She pulled Si Wuyan as they retreated and laughed. You can go ask Hades. From the moment she recklessly revealed her space, she had no intention of letting these people go back alive. If she couldn't do it, there was still Gong Dai. In any case, these people must die. You really are not a human's child, Scarface suddenly said. Gong Yimo snorted. If he was not a human, could he be a monkey? Did he think that he was reading a myth? Shut up. I'll say it right here. I want him to bleed on the spot. There were many bloodstains on Gong Yimo's body, but they all belonged to other people. At this moment, her eyes were sharp, and her cold voice spread far and wide in the cave. There was an indescribable murderous aura spreading out. This caused the temperature in the cave to drop. Scarface narrowed his eyes. Seeing that his subordinates were subconsciously retreating, he was surprised. This kind of fiendish aura was definitely not something that a princess who had been raised in the palace would have. Take Dong Wani, for example. She had killed more than 1,000 people, but she did not have this kind of aura that made people tremble. Who knew how many more secrets Gong Yimo had on her? After achieving her goal of intimidation, Gong Yimo killed the 4 people behind her in a spurt of energy. She brought Si Wuyan and ran in another direction. Everyone hurriedly chased after them, but Scarface only said in a low voice, "No matter what, Master wants him alive." The word master made Snow tremble. Although she was unwilling, she did not dare to show it. On the other side, Gong Yimo was not as relaxed as she appeared to be. After being pregnant, she could no longer treat her body as her own like before. Moreover, she had to constantly be on guard against the other party's poison and protect Si Wuyan. Under all kinds of pressure, she could not fight to her heart's content. She could only leave first. Everyone in the cave began to move. But because there were too many caves and the paths were too complicated, Gong Yimo did not know where she had run to. Suddenly, after killing 7 or 8 people, she brought Si Wuyan into a strange room. There were many red flowers growing in that room, and in the middle of the flowers was a shallow cauldron. There were piles of hearts in the cauldron, and the scary thing was that those hearts were still beating. What the hell is this? Before the people behind them caught up, Gong Yimo could not help but ask as she gasped for breath. "Don't come near." Si Wuyan looked at the flowers and said in surprise, "I've seen it in books before. This seems to be the burning fragrance flower. But isn't this flower extinct? What's its use?" Gong Yimo felt that this flower was very fragrant, but for some reason, it felt strange growing in this place. Si Wuyan said in a low voice, "This kind of extinct flower is the favorite of the venomous insects. No wonder they have so many poisonous insects with one heart. With the catalysis of the burning incense flower and the nourishment of the human heart, it's not surprising." Gong Yimo was a little surprised. In other words, what was beating in those hearts was the mother goo worm of one heart goo. Disgusting. Her face was filled with murderous intent. Shuese was a little anxious from behind. Not good. They're heading towards the greenhouse. Someone shouted. What? Shuese was shocked. The burning fragrance flower could only be found here, and it could not be transplanted or cultivated. If anything happened to those flowers, he might not be able to escape the fate of having his heart pierced through. But before he could get close, a strong fragrance accompanied by hot air wafted over. Gong Yimo actually set a fire? She was burning those flowers? No matter how fast Shuese was, by the time he arrived, those flowers had all been burned, along with those weak one-heart goo worms and eggs. Si Wuyan said in surprise as he ran. "Why do you still have a fire starter and wine on you?" Only God knew how shocked he was when he saw Gong Yimo take out a bamboo joint from her sleeve. But when he opened it, it turned out to be highly concentrated wine. Otherwise, it would not have burned so quickly. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue. "If you have time to ask so many questions, why don't you get out of here quickly? If we're caught again and poisoned with some strange poison, both you and I will die." Si Wuyan immediately quietened down, but his eyes were filled with suspicion as he scanned Gong Yimo's body from head to toe, as if it was the first time he had met her. Very quickly, they were blocked by the furious Shuese. No one knew what was wrong with him, but Gong Yimo could clearly feel that the other party had become stronger. In a moment of desperation, she had no choice but to use 80% of her strength. Her expression was slightly anxious. At this moment, a large group of bats suddenly pounced over. The bats were not scary, but the scary thing was that those bats actually had holy stones in their bodies. They let out a sound that made Gong Yimo's head splitting. At this moment, Gong Yimo's body was injured. She cursed in her heart. These bats must have been specially raised by that scar to deal with her. When Si Wuyan saw those bats coming out, he promptly took out poison powder and scattered it over. But when those bats landed on the ground, Gong Yimo also suffered quite a bit of injury. Fresh blood flowed down her right hand. Just now, her tendons were almost cut off by Shuese. Hence, she began to use her left hand to hold the sword. "Gong Yimo, I want your life." Shuese went crazy and attacked again. Chapter 7:10. Seeing Snow retreating, she did not follow up with another attack, but panted heavily as her heart was filled with uncertainty. The corner of her mouth was still stained with blood that did not belong to her. She licked it with her tongue as though she had not had enough. "How is that possible? Why is your head not hurting anymore?" This time, Snow no longer had any strength to fight, and the madness in his eyes gradually disappeared. In the dark cave, he could only see Gong Yimo revealing a ghost-like smile as she walked towards him. I also don't know. Maybe it's your blood that has temporarily suppressed the goo poison in my body. She faintly blinked her eyes. Because you've taken the antidote. I wonder if I suck you dry. Will it be able to cure the poison? Her eyes were filled with eagerness. This time, Snow retreated as though he had seen a ghost. Those bats were still crying out in annoyance, and Gong Yimo had chopped them all to death with a few slashes. The world became peaceful again. When she turned back, Snow had already disappeared. She sat on a stalactite and panted. Slowly, she took out the saint stone from the bat's body. Her expression was cold, and at that moment, a bloody thought flashed past her mind. Her kindness had disappeared, and only cruelty was left. She had purposely let Snow go because she wanted him to live. She wanted him to live until the day she had the strength to catch him and use him to create the antidote. Moreover, Snow's blood could cure the poison, and he would definitely not dare to tell anyone. Otherwise, if he was caught by those people to do research on him, he would die a horrible death. Gong Yimo rubbed her stomach. She knew that her thoughts were a little scary, but a mouthful of blood could only treat the symptoms and not the root cause. If she could not find the third antidote, why not suck Snow dry? She had not sat for long when Scarface appeared. But when he saw Gong Yimo, he was a little shocked. Because according to his estimation, even if Gong Yimo did not die, she would be heavily injured by the bats and Snow's double attack. He only needed to clean up the aftermath. When Gong Yimo saw him, she held onto the wound on her right hand and said in a low voice, "You're here to collect my corpse?" She looked weak, but Scarface did not dare to go near her. Snow was not here. It was very likely that she had defeated her. She might have an unknown trump card in her hands. "What the hell are you?" The scarred man's cold voice reverberated in the air. There was actually a trace of fear in his voice. Gong Yimo saw that the other party was not fooled, so she stopped pretending and slowly stood up. At this time, her hands were injured, so she couldn't hold a sword properly. However, she still endured the pain and pulled out a sword from her space. Looking at the other party's frightened expression, she felt that it was very interesting. "What am I? Why don't you try and find out?" After saying that, she viciously stabbed at Scarface. "Impossible. Even if Bat was killed by you, you shouldn't be so awake right now. Didn't they say that the Holy Stone's voice would give her a splitting headache?" Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. "Didn't you say that I'm not human? How can there be a weakness?" As she spoke, she had already exchanged blows with Scarface several times. The other party's martial arts was basically at the same level as Snow when she was not in her berserk state. He was far from being her opponent. But she was injured, and the other party was extremely calm and cautious. She actually couldn't take him down in a short period of time. "Gong Yimo, now that you're seriously injured, why force yourself? Why don't I let you go, and you let me go?" In the midst of the fight, he suddenly said this in a low voice. Gong Yimo laughed sinisterly. "No need. Even if I die, I'll drag you down with me." After saying that, her hand ruthlessly made use of this killing intent, and extremely quickly slashed the other party's chest fiercely with her sword. This slash almost took away half of his life. He quickly retreated, gasping for breath as he said, "Don't tell me you don't care about your mother? If you kill me, she will also die." Gong Yimo's expression turned cold. "What did you do to her?" He revealed a smile for the first time. "I want to do something to her. She will be coming to see you very soon. Send my regards to her." Wait. When Gong Yimo pounced over, he had already activated the mechanism and flipped behind the stone wall, disappearing from her sight. How could Gong Yimo be willing to accept this? Even if there was a mechanism, he must still be here. Gong Yimo held her sword and looked around for him. Now in the entire underground cave, she was the most powerful person, so she was not afraid of anything. The small injuries on her body made her irritable. She only wanted to tear down this nest. Soon, everywhere she went, there were corpses everywhere. Those Shue clansmen who helped the evildoers tried to resist, but they were all killed by her sword. She did not show any mercy. Slowly, Those people began to hide when they saw her. They only felt that she was covered in blood, holding her sword and killing people without saying anything, as if she was killing the king of hell. Blood splattered everywhere, but not only did it not quell her anger, it made her even more murderous. It was as if she had fallen into some kind of evil. The more she killed, the more she wanted to kill. She did not find those people. Maybe there were other escape routes, but she found a lot of creepy places. There was a stone room full of female corpses. Some of them seemed to have been dead for a long time. They were all mummified, but their stomachs were all bulging. It was very scary. Dongwani said that the goo worms liked unborn babies the most. Did they put the goo worms directly into the women's bodies, let them eat the babies, and then reproduce in the women's bodies? When she thought of this possibility, it was more disgusting than disgusting. She was burning with anger. Gong Yimo's anger could not be quelled. She said sorry to these people, and then set fire to the stone room. She continued to search and found their residence. And in the residence, there were many women tied up. Because they had been living underground for a long time, their hearts were very twisted. So almost all the Shui clansmen here were men. Men had desires, and the way they vented their desires was by kidnapping women. Seeing these naked women tied up here, Gong Yimo's eyes became redder. Kill. She only wanted to kill those beasts. When the women saw Gong Yimo, they regained some spirit, because Gong Yimo was also a woman. But Gong Yimo's murderous look scared them. Often, before Gong Yimo came close, they would scream and be saved by Gong Yimo in the end. But their legs were still weak. Some even thought that Gong Yimo was with them. After cutting the ropes, not only did they not thank her, they even hugged her leg and begged, "Master, I am not pregnant. Don't feed me to the worms." Gong Yimo could not help but frown. You said, they used their own flesh and blood to raise goo worms? Gong Yimo's face became more and more unsightly. She was so scared that the other party no longer dared to hug her leg. Trembling, she begged, "Yes, but I am not pregnant. Woo-woo, don't cry." Gong Yimo's cold voice made her stop crying. She raised her head, only to see Gong Yimo's cold and beautiful face. "I will save you and bring you home." Chapter 7:11. Even though Gong Yimo's voice was very cold, but this sentence still made the woman burst into tears. After being locked up for so long, she never thought that there would be a day when she would be able to leave. "Go and release the other women who were captured and follow me." And that half-naked woman took the dagger from Gong Yimo's hand and followed behind her. She didn't know why, but she was afraid at first. But now, seeing that she was covered in blood, most of which belonged to others, she actually felt at ease. After Gong Yimo saved over 10 people, she didn't stay any longer. She wanted to see what other dirty things were going on here. She continued to search, like a sharp sword. Wherever she went, there would be corpses, but it made the women behind her feel more at ease. But after seeing too much, the anger in Gong Yimo's heart became harder to quell. For the sake of the higher-ups, they had bewitched those who blindly followed them to commit heinous crimes. Now that those fellows had escaped in order to save their lives, these people who helped the tyrant became her only target to vent her anger on. They didn't dare to run out of the cave, because the miasma cloud forest's poisonous gas was not to be trifled with. They had tried to resist, but they were unable to harm Gong Yimo at all. Their own people had died, so they started to beg for mercy. In the darkness, Gong Yimo grabbed the person who was begging for mercy and said fiercely, "Do you have a way out here? Where is your leader hiding?" That person was so frightened by her murderous look that his legs went soft. "I don't know. We don't know where Holy Lord is." Gong Yimo saw his cowering appearance, and her heart couldn't bear it. But when she thought of these people, who had tortured and killed women, who had not had their hands stained with blood for the sake of their goo worms, only when they saw her who was even more evil than them, did they reveal their weak side. If it was those weak pregnant women, they would reveal their fangs without batting an eyelid and put their goo worms into their bodies. Thinking of this, Gong Yimo's sword slashed, and he fell to the ground, dead. At least this way of dying wouldn't be too painful. Gong Yimo discovered that this group of Snow Clan people had been hiding here for a long time. This huge underground cave was a complete tribe. Piles of food, stolen jewels, and captured captives. Gong Yimo followed the directions of those women and opened the cage that imprisoned the captives. When those people heard the screams outside, they thought that something big had happened. When they saw Gong Yimo coming in, that biting, cold, murderous aura made them extremely scared. "Who are you?" A cold voice sounded. Drops of blood slid down the edge of the sword. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she was like a human-shaped weapon. The dirty people huddled together like animals that had been abused. They were indeed animals that had been caught to be tested for poison. Someone said timidly, "Are you here to save us? We were all captured." Gong Yimo's expression softened when she saw that they were terrified. "Come out and follow me." After saying that, he turned around and left without delay. Her only goal now was to destroy this place, to destroy this evil place that had been hiding in Yuheng for more than 10 years. Seeing Gong Yimo's murderous aura rushing out, some of them quickly followed. Seeing that there were many women outside, they empathized with Gong Yimo and immediately let down their guard. Gong Yimo didn't call out to them. She just took the lead and walked in front. Poisonous grass? Burned. Insect eggs? Destroyed. Kill them all. The huge underground cave was on fire. According to the people who had been captured earlier, this place had been built for 11 years. It was one of the biggest caves of the Snow Clan. Now that it was destroyed, it could be said that they had suffered a great loss. But Gong Yimo was not satisfied. Snow Clan, his life must be kept. Because she didn't have the strength to take him away. Dong Luani had run away early. It was a pity that they didn't catch her, but she had the in her hands. It was very likely that she was playing with these people. As for the, it must be fake. Then there was the scar-faced man. She had slashed him in the chest. He should be seriously injured and on the verge of death. Although she wasn't much better now, she didn't want to let go of this opportunity. She had to catch him and kill him. She went deeper and deeper. By the time she reached the bottom, she didn't know how many of the Snow Clan people had been killed by her. Their pleas for mercy were already numb to her. When she really wanted to kill someone, she hesitated for only a moment. Her hands had already taken their heads. When there was nothing left to burn, Gong Yimo began to walk out. The Snow Clan people who had escaped also began to run out. At this time, they didn't care about the poisonous gas outside. If they stayed, they would die anyway. So when Gong Dai brought them here, there were people running out of the cave. It was as if there was a ghost chasing after them. There really was a ghost chasing after them. A ghost that wanted to take their lives. He raised his eyebrows coldly. Si Wuyan beside him was pale because of the poisonous gas. "It's here." Gong Dai nodded. He grabbed a person and asked coldly, "Where's the person you caught?" Frightened by Gong Ju's murderous aura, the Shui tribesman's eyes widened and he stuttered. "He ran away." "Killing people." Gong Dai frowned. He used his strength to choke the person to death and threw him away like a rag. Si Wuyan saw this and said in a low voice, "Gong Yimo will be fine. Maybe the one who killed people down there is her." Gong Dai's body tensed up even more. Royal Sister will have a headache when she hears the sound of the sacred stone. The other party will not let go of this weakness of hers. After saying that, he rushed into the cave. Everyone who ran out was killed by him from a distance. As he moved quickly, his black robe was like black lightning. With him leading the way, Si Wuyan followed closely behind and chased after him. Just when Gong Yimo thought that the other party had escaped and was about to give up, a figure suddenly flashed into the cave in front of her. It was that scarred face. Just at this time, there was a commotion above and the screams of the Snow Clan people. Gong Yimo said to the people behind her, "Someone is here to save us. You guys go up from here. When you see them, say my name, Gong Yimo. They will not hurt you." After saying that, without waiting for them to react, Gong Yimo chased after the scarred face. She was too fast. Those people could not catch up even if they wanted to. Since they heard the screams, they all became more confident and walked up. Gong Yimo chased after them but did not see anything. At this time, she was surrounded by tunnels. Who knew which one the other party had entered? She frowned anxiously. Suddenly, Scarred Face's cold voice came from the cave in front of her. Gong Yimo, you destroyed my nest. Go to hell. Gong Yimo was shocked. When she wanted to leave, she found that it was already too late. Chapter 712. Rustling sounds could be heard, and Gong Yimo saw many poisonous insects crawling out from all four sides of the cave. There were all kinds of them, so many that it made one's scalp numb. Looks like the other party did not just start raising goo after Dongwani came. They had long used the burning incense flower to raise many poisonous insects. Gong Yimo directly entered the tunnel in front to chase after that Scarface. As long as she followed him, she would definitely be able to get out. But her movements were fast, and the other party had the advantage of being able to move around. The karst cave they were in now was very different from before. There were many small caves connected together, just like an ant's underground nest. She did not know how they left the karst cave. Gong Yimo heard the rustling sounds behind her and tried her best not to turn back. This must be the other exit. She would be able to find it. Sure enough, after she turned a corner, she saw Scarface's figure. He obviously did not expect Gong Yimo to be so fast, and Gong Yimo also saw him hugging the unconscious Snow. She did not expect them to be together. Seeing Gong Yimo chasing after him, Scarface increased his speed, and he even took the time to stuff a goo poison into Snow's mouth, forcing him to go into a second berserk state. Doing such a thing when he was heavily injured would cause irreparable harm to Snow, but he could not care so much now. The goo poison melted in his mouth, and Snow suddenly opened his eyes only to see Scarface saying, "As long as you can stop Gong Yimo, I will get Master to give you the antidote for the United Hearts goo." This sentence made Snow's eyes burst with life once again. Scarface left after saying that, not telling him that other than Gong Yimo, there were also countless poisonous insects that he had released from the poison cellar. When Snow saw Gong Yimo, the old and new grudges, plus the berserk state of the goo poison made him want to stop Gong Yimo even if his injuries were to rupture again. If he could, he wanted to kill her even more. Once Snow thought of that Master, knowing that his blood could suppress the goo poison, what kind of terrifying consequences would there be? He wished that Gong Yimo would immediately die here. Only then would he be safe. But Gong Yimo was the complete opposite when she saw Snow. She did not want Snow to die, so she could only shout in panic, "Quickly run! There are many poisonous insects behind us." But Snow thought that Gong Yimo was lying to him. "You're lying. The poisonous insects are locked in the poison cellar and will definitely not come out. Don't try to lie to me. Hand your life over." Gong Yimo didn't have time to explain. She wanted to knock him out and take him away. Who knew that Snow would be so eager to kill her that it would erupt with infinite potential, causing Gong Yimo to miss several times. When Gong Yimo heard the sound approaching from behind, she could no longer care about Snow's life and death. She wanted to continue running past him. Snow stopped her several times. Just as Gong Yimo was about to kill him, he suddenly panicked and screamed, "Why are there so many poisonous insects?" "Snow, S's bodies by Snow. Follow me if you don't want to die." After Gong Yimo finished speaking, Snow subconsciously followed her. Gong Yimo realized that Snow was running upwards, which meant that the other party had dug this cave along the mountain and connected it to the cave, forming a huge nest. She had a bad feeling in her heart, but she forgot that there was an extremely dangerous person following behind her. Snow saw that Gong Yimo did not care about him and suddenly attacked her. Sensing danger approaching, Gong Yimo subconsciously moved to the side only to see that Snow had already run to the front. That was not enough. He even took the chance to kick Gong Yimo when she was caught off guard. Gong Yimo's eyes widened as she fell backwards. Behind her were the poisonous insects. Snow was elated when he saw this scene. In this situation, Gong Yimo was definitely going to die. He did not delay and continued running forward. When Gong Yimo landed, those insects were already very close to her. In a moment of desperation, Gong Yimo pulled out a tube of and scattered it behind her before lighting it up. The powder burned extremely quickly. It emitted a pungent smell of saltpeter and indeed temporarily stopped the poisonous insects from advancing. But the powder burned quickly and extinguished quickly. Gong Yimo took advantage of this little bit of time to quickly climb up and continue running forward. Very quickly, she saw a suspension bridge. They were indeed in the mountain, and the reason why there was a suspension bridge here was because the mountain had split open. Scarface was preparing to cut the suspension bridge. When Snow saw that Gong Yimo was still alive, it was as if he had seen a ghost. Why wasn't she dead? What was even more shocking was that not only was Gong Yimo not dead, those insects had also followed. Scarface saw this and used his dagger to cut the ropes even faster. As for Gong Yimo, she had not crossed the bridge. Her speed was extremely fast as she pulled out the only hairpin on her head and stabbed towards the enemy. Her feet were like the wind as she swept across the pontoon bridge. Scarface was caught off guard as the hairpin cut the back of his hand and the dagger fell. Seeing that Gong Yimo was already coming over, he wanted to escape. The insects were also coming over. Snow wanted to run but knew that if Scarface died, he would not be able to escape death. So, he might as well help him deal with Gong Yimo. More and more poisonous insects appeared. Scarface saw this and his eyes flashed with a trace of ruthlessness as he pushed Snow, whose back was facing him, forward. Gong Yimo subconsciously dodged, but Snow had already pounced towards the poisonous insects. No! At that moment, his eyes narrowed like needles. Gong Yimo was shocked and subconsciously reached out to grab Snow's hand, but did not manage to reach it. He fell to the ground and the insect in front had already viciously bitten him. Seeing him cry out in pain, Gong Yimo decided to save him in a flash. She took out some wine from her space and poured it on the ground. The strong wine was scorching and the insects did not like it. Gong Yimo did not have any more matches and could only pull Snow along as she ran. At this moment, the berserk effect on his body had already disappeared. Perhaps it was related to his heavy injuries. At this moment, his face was filled with pain as he was completely dragged along by Gong Yimo. That despicable Scarface had already run off to God knows where, and Snow was running slower and slower. Gong Yimo could not bear the burden and wanted to throw him away a few times. At that moment, Snow's face was still smiling. Because of the human skin mask, he was smiling even when he was angry. His half-closed eyes were filled with pain and fear. Looking at Gong Yimo tightly grabbing his hand, his expression became complicated. He knew that the reason why Gong Yimo saved him was most likely because of his blood. She wanted to use his blood to find the secret of the antidote, but he was sure that she also needed blood. If he fell into Gong Yimo's hands, he would definitely not die. But if he fell into the hands of those people, it might not be the same. The so-called good and evil was probably best reflected in this kind of place. He thought in a daze. Chapter 7:13. Shuese rarely reflected on his life because he felt that everyone had let him down. Everyone had let him down. He was not in the wrong. Just like Shuelian, she borrowed his hand to escape from the sacred land and married him. But she did not love him. This was all Shuelian's fault. Just like when he became the king of the Snow Clan, those people did not respect him. It was those people who were blind. He knew that the reason he became the king was because those elders thought he was easy to manipulate and obedient. But he was also a man. He also had great ambitions. He hoped to achieve great things, making everyone kneel at his feet and worship him. Finally, when he saw the goo poison, he felt that his chance had come. He made a deal with Shuelian. He helped her leave the sacred land. She stole the holy stone, the goo poison, and the antidote. Then he personally destroyed the sacred land. Most of those elders died in his hands. At the same time, Daiyu State invaded. He felt that this was a chance. Although his snow country was small, there would be a day when he could enter the central plains. Later on, Snow Country was destroyed. Shuelian was taken away by the king of Daiyu State. He had nothing. His head was filled with the delusion of reviving his country, but he did not have the strength to do so. He could only place all his hopes on the holy stone. He bewitched some patriotic Snow Clan people to work for him. Using their vengeful mentality, he did many strange things. He had always been working with evil people. He had always been asking a tiger for its skin. He had never given up on reviving his country. Other people's lives did not matter to him. He only wanted power. He only wanted to prove himself. So there was no doubt that he was a bad person. And now, this bad person, was pushed into a pile of insects by another bad person. The person he had harmed before was holding him and running for his life. Shuese suddenly felt that other than reviving his country, he also cherished his life, because he did not want to die at all. Gong Yimo was already exhausted, but when she heard the sound of water, her eyes lit up. She once again pulled herself together and ran towards the water. Soon, she saw an underground waterway. This waterway seemed to be formed naturally, because they had hollowed out the mountain. The spring water flowed inside, forming a barrier. To a human, it was not difficult to cross, but the rapid flow of water was not friendly to insects. Gong Yimo used her Qing Gong to cross the water. Seeing that the insects were washed away, she let out a long sigh of relief. She was really going to die from exhaustion. If someone were to ambush her at this moment, she definitely wouldn't have the strength to fight back. As for Snow, he was lying on the ground half dead. Gong Yimo guessed that the bug from earlier was poisonous, causing his injuries to worsen, which was why he was in this state. All right, stop playing dead. Go out and let Si Wuyan take a look at you. You won't die. Snow suddenly raised her head. Because of the human skin mask, Gong Yimo could not see his face. She could only see that his eyes were bloodshot, as if he was enduring something. Gong Yimo felt weird being stared at by him. She glared at him while gasping for breath. What are you doing? Lying on the ground, he raised his head and suddenly asked, Is my mother still alive? If he didn't mention it, Gong Yimo would have almost forgotten that she was a regular resident of Zhao Prison. Gong Dai didn't kill her, and neither did Gong Yimo. She rolled her eyes. She's alive, and her servant Shuezhan is also alive. Snow asked again, Is your mother doing well? Gong Yimo felt that it was even stranger. What has my mother doing well got to do with you? Snow only looked at her quietly. That gaze actually had a trace of indescribable sorrow. Actually, you're not my daughter. What? Gong Yimo was a little shocked now. Then whose daughter am I? Snow laid on the ground and slowly said, Back then, the reason why Shuelian came to find me for cooperation was because she could no longer stay in the sacred lands. Not only was she used to test poison, she also had to face the harassment of her half-brother. I've never touched her before. Such explosive news made Gong Yimo a little agitated. Her little face was tangled up. You mean, I'm actually my mother, and her brother's abnormal love daughter? Snow nodded. Gong Yimo smiled delightedly. I say, how can I be your child? You're so stupid and vicious, and always have some unrealistic delusions. Snow didn't refute and only said, I know you want to use my blood to detoxify the poison. In actual fact, before you, no one knew that after taking the antidote, his blood can also detoxify the poison. If you need it, take it. Gong Yimo was curious. Are you all right? You're obviously a vicious person. Why are you acting like you're sacrificing yourself for others? At this moment, his thin lips moved and suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Gong Yimo was shocked as she stretched out her hand to check, but Snow grabbed her hand. He had great strength, and as he spat out blood, he stared at her. At this moment, she then realized that Snow's hand was filled with green veins. Obviously, he was deeply poisoned. Impossible. After he was poisoned by the goo, there was no other poison that could harm him. I only have one request. His voice turned hoarse as he swallowed mouthful after mouthful of blood. My face. Don't look at my face. Gong Yimo frowned. She didn't expect that Snow was already in such a state. Why would he still care about a human skin mask? This face was not bad, but was it more important than his life? His hand gradually loosened. Snow Lotus likes handsome men. Don't uncover my face. Gong Yimo went into a blank and immediately said, all right, I won't look at your face. Hurry and let me see what's wrong with you. Snow saw that she had agreed, and just as he wanted to say something, his throat moved and he spat out another mouthful of blood. But following the blood, Gong Yimo was horrified to see a thick worm crawling out from his mouth. It had just peeked its head out from his mouth when it was scared back by Gong Yimo's scream. Snow was already dead. He closed his eyes and actually died in peace. Gong Yimo took a few steps back from Snow. Obviously, the poison would not kill him, but when the poisonous worm entered his body, it directly bit off his life force. This scene was so terrifying that it made her hair stand on end. She hurriedly checked her body to see if there were any terrifying worms on it. At this moment, a cold glint suddenly pierced towards her. Gong Yimo was stunned by the scene in front of her, and by the time she realized that someone was sneak attacking her, it was already too late. She was about to be stabbed. Gong Yimo subconsciously hugged her stomach, but at the next second, Scarface was sent flying. And coincidentally, he fell into the water flow, and it was unknown if he was dead or alive. Gong Yimo fell into a warm embrace, and her originally tightly shut eyes secretly opened up and saw Gong Dai's face, which was so black that it was almost emitting smoke. She had a shock. Her heart started to pound uncontrollably. Gong Dai? She suddenly thought that Gong Dai must have chased after the poisonous worm, and his face was so black. Could it be that he was poisoned? Did you get bitten by the worm? Don't scare me. Gong Yimo grabbed onto Gong Dai's arm tightly as her face was filled with anxiety. The shock caused by Snow's death had not dissipated and her eyes were filled with fear. Gong Dai's face turned even darker. Chapter 7:14. When Gong Yimo saw that Gong Dai was not replying, she realized that something was wrong. However, it was too late when she wanted to run away. This was because Gong Dai had already grabbed her hand tightly. When he saw the wound on Gong Yimo's hand, his pupils constricted. All the heartache in his heart turned into anger. Royal sister, sometimes I really want to break your legs. Let's see where you can run to. Gong Yimo blinked rapidly. Gong Dai's gaze made her feel uneasy. She retracted her hand. I didn't do it on purpose. It was an emergency. Si Wuyin he. Si Wuyin. Gong Dai grabbed her hand and pulled. This allowed Gong Yimo to lean closer to his chest. This also allowed her to feel Gong Dai's anger even more. No one is worth you risking your life for. No one is worth it. That thick chill made Gong Yimo unable to move. She no longer had the domineering aura from before. Her body was tense as if she was going to explode at any moment. You can't do it either. I can't do it either. Gong Dai finally hugged her. He closed his eyes in pain. However, Gong Yimo's head was pressed against his shoulder, so she did not see it. If I fall into a trap, I can only say that I'm useless. Even if I die, I won't regret it. You're not allowed to save me. Gong Yimo felt his body stiffen. She knew that she had really scared him this time. I'm sorry. I won't do it again. Can you forgive me? But in her heart, she was thinking that if such a day really came, even if she had to die, she would do it for him. Perhaps this was the same reason why he didn't want her to save him even if he died. If such a day really came, they both hoped that the other could live well. However, how could they live well without each other? At this moment, Si Wuyin had also caught up. Along the way, he was completely stunned by Gong Dai. The poisonous insects along the way were all crushed. They were really crushed. Anyway, he had not seen a single living insect along the way. Instead, he was disgusted by the insect corpses. It seemed that Gong Dai had vented all his anger on these insects. What a pity. If only there were a few left for him to test for poison. Finally, he saw the man and woman leaning against each other. His heart was instantly filled with mixed feelings. He could not describe what he was feeling. It was a little painful, but also a little gratified. In the end, all the discomfort turned into a bitter smile. Perhaps only a man like Gong Dai was suitable for a troublemaker like Mo. Most men would be good if they did not drag her down. How could they protect her and share her burdens? Therefore, he did not step forward. Instead, he looked at the couple through the flowing water and waited silently. Gong Yimo was a little tired and almost fell asleep on Gong Ju's body. Then she suddenly thought of something and excitedly said, Gong Ju, you killed that Ammer. Just now, she saw Scarface fall into the water. She did not know if he was dead or alive. Gong Dai hugged her for a while. His mood was finally not as agitated as before. However, his face was still cold. I hit him on the left side of his chest, he added. I used 80% of my strength. Gong Yimo was relieved. 80% of Gong Dai's strength was enough to shatter Scarface's heart. If he was washed into the undercurrent, there were many submerged reefs. He would definitely die. Then, Gong Yimo said excitedly, Gong Dai, I found the antidote. Gong Dai was stunned. Then, he was ecstatic. He grabbed her arm with some force. Where is it? Gong Yimo still had some lingering fear when she thought of the previous scene. She pointed at Snow's corpse and said, during the fight, I accidentally bit him. After swallowing a mouthful of his blood, it temporarily suppressed the Holy Stone's sound infection. He had taken the antidote. Therefore, his blood contains the antidote. Gong Dai frowned when he heard that. His face darkened again. He could not imagine what kind of crisis the royal sister had to bite the enemy to escape. Seeing that Gong Dai was about to get angry again, Gong Yimo reacted quickly and said, But he's dead. I don't know if his blood can still be used after he's dead. Gong Dai looked at her deeply. Finally, he let her go temporarily. He planned to go to Snow's side to take a look. Gong Yimo reminded him softly, Be careful. There are worms in his body. It's very scary. Gong Dai nodded. He felt something and suddenly turned in Si Wuyan's direction. Gong Yimo then realized that Si Wuyan was also there. She was instantly embarrassed. However, this was not the time to be shy. She quickly said, Si Wuyan, are you okay? That's great. Come and take a look at his corpse. See if it's useful. Si Wuyan nodded and walked over. When it came to serious matters, Si Wuyan was still very serious. He and Gong Dai approached Snow. Then, Si Wuyan said softly, Can you force the poisonous worms out of his body? Gong Dai looked at him. Step back. Si Wuyan stepped back. Under the light of the torch, the meridians in Snow's body bulged. It was extremely terrifying. After Si Wuyan stepped back a little, Gong Dai narrowed his eyes. After his inner strength materialized, he directly lifted Snow's body into the air. That invisible inner strength began to move up from Snow's feet. Soon, Snow's abdomen bulged a few times. It was forced up by this terrifying force and finally drilled out of his mouth. Not just one, but 3. Gong Yimo saw this scene and felt her scalp go numb again. The 3 worms were covered in blood. They wanted to run away as soon as they came out, but they were directly crushed by Gong Dai. Blood splattered everywhere, but it did not even stain Gong Dai's clothes. Gong Yimo could not help but sigh at the difference between the 6th and 8th tier. But she also had worries in her heart, but she did not voice them out. Wind and nature was an extremely profound cultivation technique. Other than requiring the cultivator's talent and perseverance, it also required the cultivator's state of mind and many other elements. Gong Dai had started cultivating at the age of 6, and now he had reached the 8th tier of wind and nature at the age of 18. As for her, she had only reached the 6th tier after a lifetime of experience. This was not because the difference in talent was too great, but because Gong Dai had taken a shortcut. Gong Yimo heard from Lo Chi that Gong Dai had almost gone berserk and was forced to stop. Only then did he have his current strength. He was like an inflated balloon, not stable at all. If nothing happened in these 2 years, Gong Dai could slowly build up his foundation and fill in the gaps between the 7th and 8th tiers. There would not be any problems. She was just afraid that something unexpected would happen and cause his inflated strength to collapse. Seeing that the worms had been killed, Si Wuyan did not say anything. He took a step forward and held onto Snow's body. But in the end, he shook his head. That worm just now was one of the most prolific venomous worms. Now that the body is already filled with its venomous eggs, and with the venom of this worm, I'm afraid his blood cannot be used. Chapter 7:15. Gong Yimo was very disappointed. What a pity. She thought that she could use Snow's blood to get rid of the goo poison. She did not expect such an unforeseen event to occur. Gong Yimo, do you have a pouch on you? Si Wuyan was a little conflicted. He now knew that Gong Yimo had a secret. Gong Yimo nodded and took out a leather wine pouch for him. Si Wuyin lowered his head and filled the pouch with blood. Although it can't be used, his blood contains the secret to the goo poison. There is no doubt about this. I'll bring it back and try it. Gong Yimo nodded. That was all they could do. Si Wuyin looked at his face. He seems to be wearing a human skin mask. Don't move. Gong Yimo suddenly stopped him. I promised him that I would not uncover his face. All right, Si Wuyin retracted his hand. It was not that he had to look. It was not appropriate to expose the corpse here. Gong Yimo remembered that he and Snow Lotus knew each other, so she simply buried him. When everyone came out, the sky was already bright. Gong Yimo curled up tiredly in Gong Dai's arms. Because of the poisonous gas in the miasma cloud forest, Si Wuyin had to search for a long time in the cave that was almost destroyed by Gong Yimo. Finally, he found some pills in a luxurious cave residence. Only then did he bring the rescued people out. Outside the miasma cloud forest, Kim Yoon had been waiting for an entire night. When he saw that Gong Yimo and Si Wuyin had returned safely, Kim Yoon finally smiled. When he saw the people behind them, he was even more shocked. He did not know how long the Snow Clan had been hiding here. They had actually captured so many people. Kim Yoon hurriedly sent people to pacify them. They returned to the capital together. When they returned, everyone came out to welcome them. When they saw that they had saved many people, they were a little surprised. A few days later, almost everyone knew that there was a cult's nest in the miasma cloud forest not far from the capital. The living people there were refining pills. Their methods were extremely vicious and cruel. And the princess from Dayu State was extremely brave. She killed her way in and out with a sword. Not only did she save people, but she also destroyed the cult's nest. Almost all the bad people were killed. Those who were not all died in the forest. They could never come out to harm people. In the past few months, the haze over everyone's head gradually dissipated. Many of the rescued people were from the capital. After they were taken back by their relatives, they were even more grateful to the princess. In addition, the contribution that the princess from Dayu State had made to Yuheng a few years ago was dug up. Not only did the storytellers brag about it, there were even people who drew portraits of the princess and circulated them among the people. The influence was so great that even Kim Yoon laughed and joked about it. He said that he was not as popular as a foreign princess. Si Wuyin had been studying the snow-colored blood and those goo worms. Kim Yoon was in charge of interrogating those captured from the miasma cloud forest. They didn't know much, but they did confess some things. For example, when Si Wuyin came previously, they wanted to take him down. However, the 1,000 people that Si Wuyin brought were all carrying drugs. One of the drugs made it especially difficult for them to control. As soon as they got close to the drugs, the goo worms in their brains would start churning. Naturally, they couldn't control the poison people to attack. Instead, they allowed Si Wuyin to enter the city safely. They only made their move after he put away the drugs. Si Wuyin then searched for something that could restrain them from the drugs he brought. In a tea house, a delicate-looking young master was drinking tea by the window. When he heard the storytellers say that the princess from Dayu State was 7 feet tall and had the strength to move mountains and rivers, he couldn't help but spit out his tea. The tall man sitting beside him frowned slightly and handed him a handkerchief. Gong Dai, do you think they're really talking about me? Why do I feel like I'm the man they're talking about? Gong Dai glanced coldly at the storytellers and said indifferently, "That's good too. What's good about it?" Gong Dai placed the peeled melon seeds on a plate in front of Gong Yimo. This way, no one will have any improper thoughts about you. At this moment, a scholar beside him suddenly said, "Although such an amazing woman can't be kept in the inner room, she can be kept in the outer room." Another scholar nodded as he drank his tea. If the princess is really like what this man said, she must be unmarried. I heard that she's almost 19 years old and is still unmarried. Doesn't that mean we still have a chance to take the princess? After all, there aren't many people who can appreciate the princess's inner qualities. Gong Yimo giggled and pressed Gong Dai's hand to calm him down. Gong Dai, do you admire my outer appearance or my inner qualities? Gong Dai's cold air was pressed down by her soft little hand, and he said helplessly, "Royal sister, you're being naughty again. Say it." Gong Yimo put one hand on the table and smiled brightly. Do you like my face, or do you like my personality? Gong Dai narrowed his eyes, and his tall body suddenly moved closer as he said softly, Don't worry. Even if you're really 7 feet tall, have the strength to move mountains and rivers, and can keep a house in check, I'll still like you. Gong Yimo blushed secretly. Gong Dai started to talk about business again. Shiwilian is coming. Why didn't you wait in the palace? Why did you run out in such a hurry? Gong Yimo saw that he was serious. She glared at him, but her expression gradually sank. We only knew that mother was coming these 2 days. But when we were in the cave, that Scarface asked me to say hello to my mother, which means they already knew. So I was a little worried. Gong Dai lowered his eyelids, thinking about it in his heart. Gong Yimo continued. Also, of the 3 antidotes, 1 is missing, and the other 2 were eaten by Shiwilian and Shuesa. Their blood may be able to cure the goo poison, but Shuesa is dead, and only Shiwilian is left. She frowned. It's fine if those crazy people don't know that their blood has the effect of curing the poison, but if they know, won't Shiwilian be in danger? Gong Dai patted her bandaged hand to comfort her. It's okay. When she comes, let her accompany you until you give birth. After everything is settled, let her leave. It seems like that's the only way, Gong Yimo sighed, but then she heard people whispering to each other. Look, those 2 men are holding hands. When Gong Yimo heard this, she quickly wanted to withdraw her hand. Gong Dai smiled and leaned forward to whisper more intimately into her ear. His special hoarse voice made Gong Yimo blush again. You're cuter when you're shy. Gong Yimo glared at him and pushed him away a little. You mean there are times when I'm not cute? Yes, when you run around. Gong Yimo puffed up her cheeks and said angrily, Then when am I cutest? Gong Dai blinked. When that exquisite face showed a little smile, the entire 2nd floor seemed to be silent for a moment. The cutest time is naturally in bed. Chapter 7:16. The 2 of them fooled around as they waited. Finally, Shiwilian's carriage entered the city in the evening. Gong Dai hurriedly ordered someone to invite her up. This time, they had not met for too long, but the 2 women were very excited. Gong Yimo saw that Shiwilian only brought a few attendants with her and asked curiously, Mother, where's Godfather? Shiwilian smiled and said, He's a busy man now. There are more and more Snow Clan people coming to Lotus Country. He has to help them settle down. Where would he have the time to follow me around? Although she said that, Gong Yimo could still hear the sweet protectiveness in her words. She sighed and said, You 2 have such a good relationship. At this moment, Gong Dai glanced at her, his expression clearly saying that their relationship was even better. At this moment, because most of the people in the tea house had gone back to eat, there was no one on the 2nd floor. Gong Yimo and Shiwilian chatted for a while before suddenly asking seriously, Mother, I heard that you have a half-brother? Shiwilian's smile froze on her face. Who told you that? Shiwilian? That bastard. Shiwilian slammed the table angrily. Isn't it just that he came to find me and I didn't let him in? He actually came here to gossip? Where is he now? Gong Yimo saw that although she was angry, there was not much disgust in her words. She said softly, He's already dead. Shiwilian suddenly widened her eyes. After a long while, she asked with a trembling voice, Dead? Who killed him? After saying that, she seemed to feel that she had misspoken and said in a low voice, That person, he deserved to die. I don't know who killed him for the sake of the people. Gong Yimo sighed. He died from a poisonous bug piercing through his heart. Before he died, he told me about my background. Shiwilian suddenly felt uneasy. He told you everything? Gong Yimo nodded, yes. When Shiwilian heard that, it was as if all her energy had been sucked out. She sighed softly and cursed, That bastard. Gong Yimo saw that she was in low spirits, but still asked, The person that Shiwilian mentioned, your half-brother, what happened back then? Mother, can you tell me? Shiwilian was silent. This question directly reminded her of the past that she didn't want to remember even if she died. Every scene was a nightmare. There's nothing that can't be said. Shiwilian shook her head and sighed. At that time, That person wanted to humiliate me several times, but he was discovered by my father and severely punished. If it wasn't because he was extremely talented in witchcraft, my father would have killed such a bastard child for the sake of his own reputation. Although I didn't kill him, I didn't allow him to leave the Holy Land. That's why Shuai never saw him. Shuelian paused for a moment, but when she thought that her daughter must have asked about this person for a reason, she endured the discomfort in her heart and continued. All this time, I've been avoiding him as much as I could, but one day, he still took advantage of me. I was humiliated by him. Shuelian didn't even dare to raise her head when she said this, but Fuya knew all of this. With her husband's support, she was much calmer than before. After being humiliated, I could no longer endure all of this. Whether it was being used by my biological father to test poison, or being violated by my half-brother, it was all unbearable. So I cooperated with Shuelian and married him, taking the opportunity to poison the people in the Holy Land. Speaking of this, she smiled deeply, because Shuelian bore the majority of the blame. So the world didn't know that the real person who poisoned them was me. It was me who poisoned everyone in the Holy Land, including my father. Perhaps you feel that I'm very scary? Gong Yimo shook her head and said seriously, "It's not your fault. Mother, you've suffered in the past." With her words of comfort, Shuelian felt much better. She was afraid that Gong Yimo would look down on her and think that she was vicious. Then is that beast also dead? Gong Yimo was full of contempt for that man. So when she asked this question, she was also furious. Shuelian shook her head. Back then, he did those things to me. Perhaps he was afraid that my father would pursue the matter, so he ran away in the night. Speaking of this, Shuelian sneered. But he didn't have it easy either. When he violated me, I used a dagger to cut his face. The dagger was poisoned, so if he didn't die, his face should be ruined. Gong Yimo was shocked. You mean, that person's face is very likely to have a scar? Gong Yimo's shock made Shuelian have a bad feeling in her heart. Could it be, you've seen someone with a scar on his face? Gong Yimo nodded solemnly. He also said, to let me say hello to you. This means that he already knew that you were coming to find me. Shuelian pondered for a moment, then her beautiful face turned pale. You're saying that there's a spy around me? Gong Yimo nodded. I can't rule out this possibility. As she spoke, she glanced at the people around her, causing them to reveal a terrified expression. Shuelian sighed in relief. Don't worry, even if there's a spy, it won't be them. Shuelian looked at her followers reassuringly, a trace of gentleness in her eyes. They were all specially arranged for me by my husband, so I can trust them. That's good. Speaking of this, Shuelian became anxious again. They won't do anything to my husband, right? Gongdai then said in a low voice, I'll have someone send a message to him. Don't be impatient. With the regent's words, Shuelian felt a lot more at ease. Then, the two chatted about something else. Since you're here, mother, wait for me to give birth before you leave. Shuelian was a little troubled. So you'll have to stay for 5 months? Gong Yimo pretended to be aggrieved and pouted. Is 5 months very long? Why, are you so anxious to go back and stay by your husband's side? Your biological daughter can't even get 5 months? Woo-woo, I'm so pitiful. Gong Yimo ran to Gong Dai to act pitiful. Gong Dai hurriedly hugged his little wife, then glared at his mother-in-law with great displeasure. Shuelian blushed at her words. What are you talking about? I didn't say I wouldn't agree. Seeing that Shuelian agreed, Gong Yimo looked up at Gong Dai with a triumphant smile in her eyes. Gong Ju, on the other hand, was amused and touched her face gently. The two chatted for a while more, then prepared to go back. When they arrived at the palace and got off the carriage, Shuelian turned around and saw Gong Dai get off the other carriage first. Then, he immediately turned around and gently carried Gong Yimo down. This action was so natural that it seemed like he had done it thousands of times. His careful movements made Shuelian a little envious. Of course, Fuya was also very good to her, so she was content. Her daughter was even luckier than her. She didn't meet the wrong person. She met the right person from the beginning, and they trusted each other and relied on each other. Seeing that their relationship was so good, Shuelian smiled gently. She thought to herself, as expected of my daughter. Her ability to control men is extraordinary. Even a person like the Prince Regent was completely bowing down to her, which made her, as a mother, feel a little proud. Chapter 717. In the evening, Gongju was reviewing the reports as usual. He was the Prince Regent. Although he had 6 subordinates who could share the burden of government affairs, there were still some things that he had to handle. Moreover, he had shops all over the 4 countries. The bank was also the first to cooperate with the other 3 countries. In addition, there was the construction of the cross-country horse ranch, the construction of the national highway, the construction of the shipyard, and so on. It could be said that he was very busy. Gong Yimo stuck out her tongue embarrassedly after entering the door. Gong Dai was so busy, but she kept troubling him. Thinking about it, she was really a troublemaker. So she sneaked behind him. At this moment, Gong Dai was staring at the reports. His eyes were cold, and his thin lips were slightly pursed. For some reason, he gave off an unapproachable feeling. However, when a pair of small hands landed on his temples, his brows suddenly relaxed. His thin lips curved, and he actually revealed a natural smile. "Didn't I ask you to sleep first?" Gong Yimo pressed his forehead lightly and heavily. "My husband hasn't slept yet. As a little wife, how can I sleep first? We don't have such a rule in our family." Gong Yimo said as if it was true. Gong Dai closed his eyes. When that excessively exquisite face closed his eyes, the impact was reduced, and there was actually some gentleness. "Then, little wife, do you have to listen to your husband?" Gong Yimo smiled mischievously. "That depends on what it is. If you ask me to sleep, I won't do such a rebellious thing. However, if it's to share your burdens, such as helping you look at the accounts, I'm still very willing to listen to you." As she spoke, she wrapped her arms around his neck from behind and acted coquettishly. "If you miss this opportunity, you won't get another one. It's rare that I'm willing to look at the accounts." Gong Dai smiled gently. "You're really not going to sleep?" "I'm not tired." Gong Dai opened his eyes and pulled her to his side, then carried her to his lap. "Sleep. As long as you're with me, I'm fine. With you by my side, I'm not tired at all." Gong Yimo found a comfortable position in his arms. "How about this? You look at the accounts, and I'll look at the accounts. Anyway, Bai Sheng has already screened them. It's not tiring to look at them. In fact, accounting was something that Wang Fei should do, but Gong Dai didn't want her to work hard, so he did everything by himself." Seeing that Gong Yimo was so sincere, Gong Dai gently kissed her forehead. "Then I'll have to trouble you, my wife." Gong Yimo hugged his neck and kissed him back unabashedly. "It's no trouble at all. I only do it occasionally anyway." Gong Dai smiled and picked up a thin booklet for her. Then, he hugged her and read the booklets. Because the things that were given to him were all important matters, Gong Dai also needed to consider some problems. Every time he was thinking, he would see the little thing in his arms obediently look at the accounts. She frowned because this thing was very boring, but she looked at it very slowly. She was the kind of little lazy bug that had to do it well. Seeing her like this, Gong Dai felt his thoughts become even more stagnant. No wonder people said that the land of warmth was the hero's mound. Because she was in his arms, he only wanted to empty his mind and enjoy her body temperature. The years were peaceful. Perhaps it was like this. Seeing Gong Dai stare at her, Gong Yimo finally looked up. "If you don't work faster, you'll have to sleep very late again." Gong Ju simply put down his pen and rubbed it against her neck. "Hugging you. I don't want to do anything else." His warm body was close, and there was a nice fragrance. Gong Yimo was hugged tightly by him and only felt very warm. "Then what do you want to do?" Gong Dai's voice was a little annoyed. "Do some things that are not convenient for you to do now." Gong Yimo smiled proudly. When there were only the 2 of them, Gong Dai would also act coquettishly. Others might not be able to imagine him acting coquettishly, but Gong Yimo felt that it was very cute and her heart was filled with sweetness. "Just bear with it, there are still 5 more months." A large hand covered her stomach. Gong Dai sighed faintly. "It took me 12 years to marry you, and we've only been intimate 5 times. But we still have to wait for 5 more months. One look and I can tell that this child won't dote on his father. Gong Yimo was melted by his slightly resentful, handsome face. She hugged him and kissed him fiercely. He doesn't dote on you, but I dote on you. After giving birth to him, we won't have any more children. How about that? Gong Dai frowned. But I want a daughter like royal sister. Gong Yimo frowned with some embarrassment. Then you'll have to endure for another year. Gong Dai struggled for a while and finally said, Then I don't want it. Gong Yimo laughed. Gong Xiaoju, does your mother know that you're so cute? Gong Dai blinked and even gave her an illusion of purity. It's good that you know, royal sister. She didn't know why, but every time he called her Sister Gong, Gong Yimo would feel a tingling sensation. It was as if those 2 words had been whispered thousands of times by him. Gently, there was a different kind of lingering feeling. In the candlelight, Gong Yimo blushed slightly. Gong Ju hugged her belly and said, Don't worry, I have to raise him quickly. And then? Then let him take over my duties. What about you? I'll take you out to play. Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. What if it's a daughter? Gong Dai shook his head. Since he doesn't love his father, it must be a son. I have a hunch. But what if it's a daughter? Gong Dai was embarrassed. His cold eyebrows became lively as he looked at Gong Yimo with a thorny expression. Then I'll have to work hard for a few more years. Gong Yimo was not satisfied. If it's a daughter, will you love her or me? It must be you. What if the daughter is jealous? Gong Dai held her hand tightly. Give birth to a son for her to play with. Gong Yimo was satisfied. Husband, you're so good. Do you regret it? Gong Dai suddenly asked. Although his voice was still cold, it gave a soft feeling. Gong Yimo blinked and looked at his handsome face. Regret what? Gong Dai lowered his head and nibbled on her lips. Regret that you didn't marry me earlier. Gong Yimo was slightly stunned. After being kissed by Gong Dai, she still blinked and looked at him foolishly. Gong Dai couldn't help but laugh. The candlelight made his facial features look even gentler. His smile was like a snow lotus suddenly blooming on the heavenly mountain, with a kind of unexpected beauty. Think about it. If you married me after discovering my feelings, children would be running around now. Gong Yimo glared at him. You married me just to have children? Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. Silly, I said that we could have slept on the same bed long ago. Gong Yimo suddenly exclaimed, because Gong Dai carried her. Stop fooling around. Let's sleep together. Kim Yoon-gij, you just have to remember what you promised me on the day of your coronation. Kim Yoon's exquisite eyes dimmed. Of course I remember. You said that you hoped that the 4 countries would be peaceful for 100 years, and that there would be no wars. Seeing that the cinnabar mole on his face had dimmed, Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows. What? I said that you must be happy. You promised me in front of all the civil and military officials that you must be happy. At this point, she looked to the side. Gong Dai was talking to Si Wuyan. Feeling her gaze, he looked over and smiled. Gong Yimo also smiled back. Then she turned around and continued to speak to Kim Yoon. Some people are very lucky to meet the person who will accompany them for the rest of their lives and love them for the rest of their lives. However, some people are very bumpy and they need to meet a few more times. Kim Yoon-gij, I still have to say that I am very grateful that you like me. You are very good. However, I already have Gong Dai. Perhaps people will reincarnate many times and have different choices each time. However, in this life, I have chosen him and I will not change my mind. As for you, I hope that you can be happy and have a good partner. Kim Yoon pursed his lips. He wanted to say something, but he felt powerless. Me too. What? His voice was too soft and Gong Yimo did not hear it clearly. However, Kim Yoon suddenly looked at her and said word by word. I said that I am the same as you. I am someone who will not change my mind once I have made my choice. At this point, he smiled bitterly. I chose you and you chose Gong Dai. The only thing I can do is to give you my blessings. Gong Yimo was stunned. At that moment, Kim Yoon's face became clearer in her mind. His face was exquisite, and there was a gentleness that came from within. I give you my blessings because Gong Dai is a better choice than me. However, if there is really a reincarnation, I really hope that I can meet you earlier than him. I may not be as strong as him, but I will love you as much as he does. At this point, he suddenly took a step forward and hugged Gong Yimo tightly. I know that you are leaving. Immerse, I will miss you and give you my blessings. You don't have to feel guilty because you have given me enough. Kim Yoon Gij. Gong Yimo pursed her lips and suppressed her urge to persuade him. She only said, I give you my blessings too. Kim Yoon hugged Gong Yimo for a while, and then let go. Even so, Gong Dai still managed to snatch her back. He glared at Kim Yoon and loosened his grip. He really felt that he was an eyesore. Kim Yoon smiled gently. Gong Dai, I will leave Immerse to you. If you dare to let her down as her brother, I will not let you off. He spoke in a natural and unrestrained manner, as if he had completely let go. Gong Dai's expression became a little better, but his face was still cold and stiff. Mind your own business. Royal sister had him. How could there be a day when these irrelevant people would interfere? The next day, Kim Yoon personally sent them to the gates of the capital city. This time, he could finally calmly watch Gong Yimo leave. At the same time, Shuelian and Si Wuyan left with her. They had decided to go to Luyi because Luye's Holy Land was very likely to be the last nest of the Snow Clan. When Gong Yimo turned around, she saw Kim Yoon standing alone at the front. The black mass of guards and the gloomy sky were all gray and mute. Only he was wearing a golden crown and a yellow robe. His exquisite features and tall posture were like a specimen that would never fade, forever imprinted in her mind. Gong Ju pulled her gaze back with some displeasure. Royal sister, why did you help him in the first place? In the carriage, Gong Dai frowned slightly. Because he is good-looking? Gong Yimo pursed her lips and smiled. You also think he is good-looking? Gong Dai pursed his lips. Gong Yimo moved closer. Because there were only the two of them in the carriage, Gong Yimo lay in his arms without restraint and sighed softly. Because he had once betrayed the world for her. Because in 2 lifetimes, regardless of the circumstances, he had devoted himself to her. It was a pity that she was not the right person for him in both lifetimes. You don't need a reason to help someone. If you really ask, it is because I owe him. Since Gong Yimo said so, Gong Dai did not ask anymore. After so many ups and downs, Gong Dai finally understood a principle. As long as she was around, there were many things. Why would he need to get to the bottom of it? As the saying goes, it is rare to be confused. Chapter 719. 5 months had passed, and it was already very obvious. Gong Yimo hugged her stomach and sat outside the carriage with a frown on her face. Everyone was starting a fire and setting up camp. They would reach Lu Ye's Huacheng tomorrow. There were many tribes around, but they did not seek refuge. Although there was more food now, and the people of Lu Yi would not starve in winter, they would not be rich either. What's wrong? Gong Dai saw Gong Yimo frowning and walked over. At this time, everyone was busy with their own things. Gong Yimo had nothing to do, and Gong Dai had finished his own things. Gong Dai, I suddenly thought of a very serious problem. What? Gong Dai sat beside her and handed her a cup of hot water. It was just right for her to drink. Gong Dai looked cold, but he had always been a very meticulous person. Gong Yimo rested her head on his shoulder and drank the water in small sips. Gong Dai could not help but reach out and hug her when he saw her sad and depressed look. I'm going to put on weight soon. You're so good-looking, I don't even match you when I walk beside you. Gong Dai ruffled her hair. Silly words. Although he said that, he laughed softly. Royal sister had been using all kinds of methods to praise him for his good looks recently. She was afraid that he would have a knot in his heart about Kim Yoon, and she was afraid that he would be unhappy. His baby was also a person who was rough but also meticulous. Gong Yimo saw Gong Dai smile. Since she had achieved her goal, she did not act dumb. We should reach Huacheng tomorrow. I hope that we can settle things quickly and go back. It's best if we can get back before we have children, Gong Dai nodded. Daiyu State was their home. He did not think so in the past, but now, Gong Dai felt very close to that country. Because of her, he had a home. Si Wuyan walked over. He was a little tired, but more than that, he was proud. I know what stimulated the venomous worms in those brains. He had brought many medicines from Yuqi. Recently, he had been investigating them to find out what had prevented him from being intercepted. After experimenting with many medicines, he finally found the root of the problem. Gong Yimo looked at the small ball in his hand and was pleasantly surprised. Could it be this? What is this? Si Wuyan said, "This is made from the seeds of dandelion grass. I know what kind of venomous worms that can parasitize a person's head. It's disgusted. It's just that I don't know how they made it so big. What's interesting is that this kind of venomous worms, but they are very afraid of the seeds." Gong Yimo leaned closer and sniffed. There doesn't seem to be any smell. Si Wuyan passed the small ball to her. Humans can't smell it, but insects can. Although the seeds of the dandelion grass have no smell, the smell of its flowers and leaves is very strong. Gong Yimo smiled. That's good. Make more of these balls. We'll take one each and see what they can do. Si Wuyan nodded. This is not difficult. Give me some time, and I'll be able to solve it. Gong Ju, on the other hand, was concerned about another matter. Do you have any idea about venomous worms? Speaking of this, Si Wuyan could not help but turn to look at Shuelyan. She was boiling soup. The cold wind was blowing, but she looked very calm. The raw materials of venomous worms are venomous worms and holy stones. Holy stones do not belong to this world. Everything in this world has a mutual counteraction. It's not suitable for venomous worms. Si Wuyan's words hit the nail on the head. He frowned and looked very troubled. Moreover, holy stones are not considered venomous, but they have the effect of changing the human body. The effects it derived later were all concocted by adding various venomous worms. So strictly speaking, venomous worms cannot be cured. A gust of cold wind blew. Gong Dai hugged Gong Yimo, who was in a daze, and said with a frown, "Then what's the matter with Shuelyan?" Si Wuyan's red robe was blown up by the cold wind. His voice was serious, without any of his usual teasing. The antidote that Shuelyan took did not completely cure the venomous worms. For example, she is injured now. Her wounds will heal quickly, and she is immune to all poisons. The accumulation of poison will only make her go into hibernation at most. From this, we can see that she did not cure the venomous worms. She only took a kind of medicine to get rid of the venomous worm side effects, such as madness and the damage to her willpower. This medicine is extremely complicated. Gong Yimo blinked. In other words, other than finding the third antidote, there is no cure for the venomous worms? If the third antidote is found, can you replicate it? After all, she was not the only one who was poisoned. Many others were poisoned. Si Wuyan touched his chin. Although I can't say that I can replicate it, it shouldn't be a big problem. But let's not talk about others. If it's just treating you, it's not like there are no other ways. Gong Yimo's eyes widened. You're not allowed to have any ideas about my mother. Si Wuyan saw that she was so protective and glanced at her. All right, then pretend I didn't say anything. Gong Dai pursed his lips. He looked at Gong Yimo and then at Shuelyan. If only he had arrived earlier and caught Shuelyan. The poison in the royal sister's body was ultimately a scourge. The sky gradually darkened. Everyone rested by the bonfire and chatted. The wind gradually died down. In the vast grassland, their bonfire was like a grain of sand in the vast ocean. Gong Yimo had fallen asleep on Gong Dai's lap. Recently, Gong Yimo had become very sleepy. Gong Dai was becoming more and more skilled in taking care of people. He pulled up the felt covering Gong Yimo's body. Suddenly, he paused. Someone's coming. Gong Dai's words woke everyone up. Gong Dai heard the commotion. There were quite a number of people coming. Gong Yimo rubbed her eyes. The sound was getting closer. She also heard it. There was a group of people galloping over on horseback, but she was not worried. Although the other party had a lot of people, they might not be a match for them. Soon, a group of people came from afar. There were about 2,000 to 3,000 of them. They held torches in their hands. It was like a fire dragon attacking, illuminating the horizon. The sound of horse hooves was hurried and the ground was shaking. Gong Yimo looked up. Her chest seemed to be shaking. The figure of the leader gradually became clear. He was tall and powerful, with an imposing appearance. Sitting on horseback, he gave off a feeling of superiority. Gong Yimo, how have you been? A strong male voice was heard. Gong Yimo immediately recognized who he was. Longcheng Wuji? He actually came to pick her up in the middle of the night? Gong Dai's cold face sank. The surrounding cold wind that had stopped seemed to wreak havoc again. Everyone shivered. They lamented in their hearts that it was not easy for the regent. Wherever he went, there would be his love rival. The group was getting closer and closer. When they got closer, Longcheng Wuji slowed down. Finally, he stepped in front of Gong Yimo and looked down at her from above. In the bonfire, Gong Yimo saw Longcheng Wuji's handsome face again. She was dazed. She thought it was the time when they were drinking and chatting. Gong Yimo. His slightly curly black hair fell down. He grinned. We meet again. Chapter 720. The way he made his entrance was really surprising. That aura of total annihilation almost forced the darkness back. At this time, Gong Dai waved his hand, and a gust of wind startled Longcheng Wuji's horse. He hurriedly tried to control his horse. After stabilizing it with great difficulty, that imposing aura had almost collapsed. He couldn't help glaring at Gong Dai. Prince Regent, what do you mean by this? Gong Dai pulled Gong Yimo into his arms. Royal sister is pregnant with this prince's child. It's too dangerous for you to ride near. Gong Dai was cold, but he emphasized the words, this prince's child. Longcheng Wuji was stunned. He subconsciously looked at Gong Yimo's stomach, and his handsome face became complicated. Gong Yimo, you already have a child? Gong Yimo felt the pressure in the air and felt a little helpless. Why couldn't these men get along better? They were clearly in a cooperative relationship. That's right, I already have a child. Longcheng Wuji raised his eyebrows, but didn't you fail to get married? This sentence made Gong Dai's hand on Gong Yimo's waist tighten. He decided that when he returned, he would immediately hold another wedding. Moreover, he wanted the entire world to know about Gong Yimo. Marry him, Gong Dai. Gong Yimo saw the man beside her freeze, and the people behind her were trembling. In order to make her life easier, she said righteously, although I didn't get married, I already won't marry anyone other than Gong Dai. So to have a child in advance, I'm willing. Longcheng Wuji's face darkened, but he thought of something and didn't continue. He just said in a muffled voice, forget it, this isn't the place to talk. This prince guessed that you would arrive soon, so I came to pick you up. The people behind Longcheng Wuji all had black lines on their faces. He clearly only wanted to pick up the princess. Longcheng Wuji raised his eyebrows and looked around. Since you're pregnant, how can you sleep in the open? You'll have to work harder at night. You'll have to go to my royal city tonight. Now, that place will definitely shock you. Gong Yimo glanced at Gong Dai. Since the other party had come to invite them in the middle of the night, she should give them some face. In the end, Gong Dai still cared about the royal sister's health and finally nodded. He nodded, and everyone began to break camp. Longcheng Wuji jumped off his horse and walked to Gong Yimo's side, feeling a little depressed. How did you get pregnant so quickly? His eyes were filled with pity. Although he had promised Gong Dai that he would give up on Gong Yimo, he didn't expect Gong Dai to act so quickly. This made him feel bad, and he sighed in his heart. Before Gong Yimo could say anything, Gong Dai's face had already darkened. In the future, he would never bring royal sister to Luyi again. At this time, feeling the threat, Longcheng Wuji glanced at Gong Dai. The two of them were equally tall, staring at each other by the fire. They both had their own auras, and neither was willing to back down. Don't be so guarded. This prince doesn't have any other intentions. Although this prince misses Gong Yimo, this prince won't go back on his promise. His open and honest attitude won Gong Ju's favor. Gong Ju's face cleared up a little, but his expression remained cold. Then you should be careful with your words. Daiyu State is different from Luyi. There are some things that shouldn't be said. Gong Dai's cold words made Long Chengwuji unhappy. If you like her, then you like her. Why do you have to hide it? This prince wants to say it. If Gong Yimo doesn't like you, even if she's pregnant, this prince is willing to welcome her. Gong Dai expressed that he wanted to kill people not because he had a bad temper, but because there were always people looking for death. Wait, calm down. Gong Yimo saw that the situation wasn't right, so she quickly stood between the two of them. It's already packed. Shouldn't we be leaving? Hearing Gong Yimo's words, the two of them looked at each other, then looked away. The army returned to the camp, and the formation was astonishing. Si Wuyin sat on the horse and asked curiously, King Luyi, why did you bring so many people? Long Chengwuji's eyes darkened. Recently, the grasslands haven't been peaceful, especially near the capital. This prince personally came to welcome you to ensure that nothing goes wrong. Si Wuyin felt bad. According to what you said, could it be that Lu Yi is also in turmoil? Suddenly, Gong Dai walked out of the carriage and looked into the distance with an unfriendly expression. Long Chengwuji's horse was uneasy, but he laughed and pulled out his sword. Under the light of the torch, he revealed a set of white teeth and smiled cruelly. It can't be considered as turmoil, but it might be a blessing from the eagle god. Since winter, there will be wild beasts eating from time to time. Si Wuyin saw that he suddenly pulled out his sword, so he urged his horse to retreat a few steps. At this time, Gong Yimo waved at him. Si Wuyin, you also come to the carriage. But Shuelian had already gone in. Si Wuyin knew that he didn't know martial arts, so this wasn't the time to be brave. So he got off his horse and entered the carriage. His body still carried the chill of the winter night, so once he entered, he warmed himself up by the brazier. This soft cushion and smokeless silver charcoal, one couldn't help but say that Gong Dai was so devoted to Gong Yimo that it made one's hair stand up. What's going on? Si Wuyin sat near the door of the carriage and lifted the curtain to look outside. He saw that it was pitch black outside. So why did Gong Dai go out? Gong Yimo squinted her eyes. There's a large group of animals approaching. If I'm not wrong, it's very likely to be wolves. Si Wuyin still didn't understand. If it's a pack of wolves, is there a need to be so nervous? King Lu Yi brought 3,000 men. Gong Yimo shook her head. It's not an ordinary wolf. It's as if they have intelligence. They actually came from different directions to surround us. And their movements are very fast. Following Gong Yimo's words, there was a blood-curdling scream. Shuelian's body instantly tensed up. Will there be any problem? Why are there so many monsters? Gong Yimo was unable to answer her, but it was Si Wuyin who couldn't help but sigh. A huge rock that fell from the sky, bringing countless possibilities. Now it seems that not only did those people turn people into neither humans nor ghosts, now even animals are not spared. When Shuelian heard this, she couldn't help but feel sad. At the very beginning, it was to develop the elixir of immortality. Although my father is cruel, but he has never experimented on anyone other than me. Gong Yimo comforted her. This matter isn't your fault. If we really want to talk about it, if the holy stone is used in the right way, there will be many benefits. But human nature is greedy, and there will always be people who don't walk the right path. Mother, you don't need to blame yourself for this. Shuelian nodded. Speaking of which, this could be considered as a joke played by the heavens. If the holy stone had not fallen in Snow Country, nothing would have happened. But the holy stone had indeed fallen in Snow Country, and Snow Country was a country that worshipped the witchcraft evil god. Moreover, it could have different reactions with different goo worms. Who knew what new tricks the other party had developed during this period of time? Chapter 721. The sounds of killing outside became louder and louder. Gong Yimo and the other two sat in the carriage as if they were caught in a whirlpool. Peace and danger were only separated by a wooden plank. Finally, when a person was attacked by a wolf and the back of his head hit the carriage, Gong Yimo suddenly pulled out her sword. Si Wuyin, take care of my mother. I will go out and take a look. Before Si Wuyin could say anything, Gong Yimo had already gone out and chopped off the wolf's head, saving the person who hit the carriage. Thank you. Thank you, princess. And Gong Yimo nodded and joined the battle. Longcheng Wuji loudly reminded everyone. There is poison on the wolf's claws. Once it sees blood, it will be unconscious for a few hours. All the injured people gather in the middle of the group. When Gong Yimo heard, she saw the young man who she had just saved holding his hand. It was obvious that his hand was injured. Can you still walk? Go to the middle of the group. The other party nodded. Si Wuyan also heard the sound and quickly ordered the coachman to go to the middle of the group. A few thousand people formed a circle and were prepared to face the sneak attack from the dark. Those wolves seemed to have intelligence. After a round of attack, they stopped. Gong Dai realized that these wolves were very fast and were not afraid of fire. They cooperated very well, and in the dark, it was not easy to deal with them. What is going on with these wolves? When did they appear? Gong Dai walked behind Longcheng Wuji and asked coldly. At this moment, Longcheng Wuji's eyes were fixed on the dark, not missing any threat. These bastards only appeared in the past 10 days. Luckily, although they are powerful, this king's warriors are not to be trifled with. Although many are injured, the death rate is not high. Gong Dai was curious. Then what about those who are injured? Longcheng Wuji looked at him strangely. Those who have recovered will continue to fight and guard against these bastards. Those who are seriously injured are still recuperating in the royal city. Gong Dai frowned. Just as he was about to say something, Gong Yimo walked over. Didn't you check the poison on their claws? Royal sister? Gong Yun's brows furrowed even tighter. It's fine here. Go back and rest. Even Longcheng Wuji said, since you're pregnant, just stay put. This is a man's business. You don't have to worry about it. Gong Yimo raised her eyebrows in displeasure. What's wrong? Back when I was in Luyi, you also worried a lot. Was I not a woman in the past? Longcheng Wuji paused, but at this time, he couldn't argue with Gong Yimo, so he could only explain, Luyi has very few doctors. Gong Yimo pursed her lips. She had almost forgotten that these men from the grasslands would usually fight it out when they got sick. They would only go to a doctor if they really couldn't take it anymore. Apparently, they had discovered that the poison on the wolf's claws would cause people to fall asleep, but there were no side effects after falling asleep, so they didn't bother about it anymore. Then are there any suspicious people in Luyi recently? Longcheng Wuji glanced at Gong Dai. I received a letter from the regent. This king sent a large army to surround the city every day, but didn't let anyone in. Not only did his words not make Gong Yimo feel relieved, but she also frowned slightly. Perhaps it was because Longcheng Wuji's defense was too tight that those people changed their tactics. Gong Ju also seemed to think of something. He turned to Longcheng Wuji and said, This prince thinks that those who are recuperating in the palace are very dangerous. You'd better send people out of the city first and evacuate those who are injured. How can that be? Longcheng Wuji frowned. These people are all warriors who were injured in order to protect Luyi. If they move out, where can they move to in this cold weather? And what's wrong with them? Gong Yimo wanted to explain, but the wolf pack started the second round of ambush. Gong Dai, don't you think that they are purposely delaying our footsteps? Gong Dai nodded. Now it seemed that something had happened in the capital. Longcheng Wuji was afraid that they would be attacked on the road, so he brought people to welcome them. Little did he know that the other party might be waiting for him to leave. Although the wolves were fast and aggressive, they were not a match for everyone. But if they stopped fighting, wouldn't they be unable to hurry on their way? Gong Yimo touched the stone hard on her neck. When she was fighting side by side with Gong Dai, the two of them calmly discussed. Longcheng Wuji values relationships. If he goes back, I'm afraid that he won't be able to handle this matter well. It's better to stay and completely destroy the wolf pack. Right now, only you and I have the highest martial arts. Do you choose to stay here, or do you choose to go to the capital first? Hearing Gong Yimo's words, Gong Dai hesitated for a moment. I'll go to the capital with you. Gong Yimo shook her head. I don't feel at ease with Mother here. That scarred face from last time was confirmed to be Mother's brother. I always thought that he was the mastermind. He took your palm and should be dead. But what if he didn't die? Gong Yimo felt uneasy. If he didn't die, he must have heard Snow's words when he ambushed me. He knew that after taking the antidote, his blood would be different. Then tonight, it might be another trick by the other party to lure us away. Between the two of us, only one can go. Gong Dai also understood Gong Yimo's concerns. Tonight's turmoil, was it because the capital was in danger and wanted to delay their footsteps, or was it a diversion to lure them away and capture Shuilian? The other party's motive was not easy to guess. But in comparison, going to the capital was relatively safer. After all, it was just a guess. Those injured soldiers might not be in danger. Gong Dai found it hard to choose. He even thought that whether the capital was in danger or not, as long as his royal sister was fine, why bother? But he knew that Gong Yimo would not allow the other party's scheme to succeed. Knowing that Gong Dai was concerned about her, Gong Yimo said softly as she killed the wolves, "I'll go to the capital. I'll get some blood from Mother and bring the pills that Si Wuyan gave me. Nothing will happen. If there's nothing else, I'll wait for you in the capital." Gong Dai pursed his lips. With a wave of his hand, he killed more than a dozen wolves. He was angry and kept fighting with Gong Yimo, killing more than 100 wolves. The wolves retreated, but Gong Dai's face darkened and he did not speak. Gong Yimo took the initiative to kiss him. "All right, I know you want to protect me, but you forgot that when we were young, I was the one who called the shots. If I really become your canary, what if you don't like me anymore?" Gong Dai helplessly pinched her face. "No matter what, I love you." Gong Yimo smiled sweetly. "Then let's work together as husband and wife. The sooner we settle this, the sooner we can go home." After a while, Gong Dai nodded helplessly. "Be careful." At this moment, Longqingwuji walked over curiously. Gong Yimo quickly told him about her worries. Although it was just a precautionary measure, they could not rule out the possibility of someone causing trouble in the capital. Longqingwuji thought for a while and gave her the life token on his neck. Gong Yimo's life token was still hanging on it. This made Gong Yimo stunned. "The army will be here soon. If there's anything, don't force yourself." He only had one thought at this moment, and that was to kill all the wolves tonight, to prevent future troubles. Chapter 722. When Gong Yimo asked Shuilian for blood, Shuilian was shocked, thinking that Gong Yimo was going to do something dangerous. When she found out that Gong Dai stayed behind because Immerse wanted him to protect her, she quickly said, "There are so many people here. With King Luyi here, I'll be fine." Gong Yimo shook her head. "It's better to be safe than sorry. If that bad guy doesn't die, you'll be in danger. Also, I'm just leaving first. Nothing bad will happen to King City. Don't worry." Shuilian still felt that it was inappropriate, but Gong Yimo was a very independent person. She wanted to give Gong Yimo more blood, but Gong Yimo refused, only saying that it was enough. After Gong Yimo left, Longqingwuji and Gong Dai discussed a plan to kill all the wolves here to prevent future trouble. There were many wolves and they moved quickly, but they were no match for Gong Dai's martial arts. When the two of them fought together, the wolves were scared and instinctively started to run away. But at this time, a few soldiers in the middle suddenly woke up from their sleep. When they woke up, their eyes turned red. Before anyone could react, they had already killed several people. Gong Ju frowned. They had the pills given to them by Si Wuyan, so the manipulator shouldn't be nearby. These people weren't being controlled. They were simply going crazy. Gong Ju ordered Longqingwuji to chase after the wolves, while he controlled the crazed soldiers. At this time, Si Wuyan came down and examined the bodies of the soldiers. It can't be wrong. The other party smeared the goo poison on the wolves' claws. At first, it was just a little bit, but after being scratched repeatedly, the poison will settle down and they will be completely infected with the goo poison. Gong Dai's expression was serious. Then isn't Royal Sister in danger? He hurriedly got up. Royal Sister should not have gone far. He could still catch up to her. Shuilian also said from the side, "Goo poison is so scary. Your Highness, you should go with Immerse." But Si Wuyan frowned and sternly said, "Gong Dai, I know that in your eyes, other than Gong Yimo, nothing else is important. However, Shuilian is here. If the other party really wants to capture her, King Lu Yi and the others won't be able to stop them. Gong Dai frowned. Ever since they were young, he and the royal sister had different intentions. It was as if he didn't care about Xuelian's life at all. Si Wuyin whispered, "You and Gong Yimo are husband and wife, and you grew up together. You know her ability. Why are you so worried?" At this moment, Gong Dai suddenly thought of what the royal sister said. Husband and wife are of the same mind. Husband and wife, doesn't that mean he should protect her? In the winter night, Longqing Wuji brought people to kill the remaining wolves. Only the people brought by Gong Dai and some injured people stayed here. After a chaotic battle, the smell of blood spread in the air. Gong Dai was silent, as if he was caught in some kind of difficult problem. Si Wuyin said as he bandaged the wounds of those who were injured. Gong Yimo is a person who cares about her country, but you are different. You only have her in your heart. But when your beliefs collide with hers, are you willing to fulfill her, or are you willing to stick to yourself and make her obey you? This was the first time someone had said such words to Gong Ju. Country, what does these things have to do with him? But what if these are things that the royal sister cares about? Between him and the royal sister, will he be assimilated by the royal sister, or will the royal sister yield to his will? The answer is self-evident. But Xuelian was a little nervous. In her opinion, her daughter blindly letting a person who loves her accommodate her is not a wise thing to do. But she also secretly hoped that Gong Dai was different. He was different from most of the men in this era who respected their wives, but were very egotistical at the crucial moment. But will he be different? Gong Dai, he has the strongest military force, sits on the strongest country, has money, power, and is very young. This kind of person is already far better than those men. Then, will he allow a woman to go against him again and again, make him obedient, and retreat step by step? Gong Dai took a deep breath. This king understands. In the firelight, his silver-gray hair set off his beautiful yet cold face. Especially when his black, jade-like eyes look at her, Xuelian couldn't help but tremble. Country, faith, and will. If all of these are what the royal sister wants, then this king also wants them. After saying this, he looked at the horizon and let his impetuous heart gradually sink. His royal sister has never disappointed him. Besides supporting her, loving her, and believing in her, what else can he do? Who told him to love her to the bone? Gong Yimo naturally didn't know what was happening here. Her thoughts were very simple, and that was to quickly solve this matter and stop this kind of busy life. Gong Dai didn't like her to worry about everything, so when the time comes, she can be at ease and be a silly girl. Gong Dai didn't like her to stick her head out for everything, so when the time comes, she can be at ease and be a canary behind him. However, all of this was built after the dust had settled. She knew that sometimes she was too forceful, so Gong Dai could only listen and endure time and time again. But she swore that after everything was settled, she was willing to become what he wanted. She didn't care about the world and only wanted to be a delicate wife. Gong Yimo smiled slightly. Under the full speed of her qinggong, she arrived at a day's journey in 4 hours. Looking at the majestic city gate in front of her, Gong Yimo secretly nodded. No wonder Longqing Wuji said that King City would shock her. It was indeed much wider and taller. It already had the domineering aura of a country's capital, and what made her feel gratified was that King City was very quiet at this time, and there were no big fights. It seemed that she was overthinking. She quietly sneaked in, and from the palace, there were bursts of crying. The mother and daughter cried together. The old consort looked at the little girl in front of her and cried, "Your royal brother is too cruel. He actually didn't allow you to return home. You suffered outside, and you've lost weight." And in front of the old consort was Longqing Ting Shui. No one understood the light that flashed through her eyes. She cried while looking at the old consort in front of her. This old woman kept saying that she doted on her, but when her royal brother used their glory and wealth to force her, her good parents didn't say a word, for fear of angering her royal brother. This kinship was really cheap. Since that was the case, what else did she have to worry about? Others treated her with false affection, so she could only rely on herself. She would take back everything she wanted. Mother, you don't know, the husband that my royal brother found for me, he is not a man at all. No, it should be said that he likes men and has never touched your daughter. The old consort's eyes darkened. Then aren't you a living widow? Chapter 7:23. Long Cheng's Ting Shui cried even harder. That's right, mother. Those two men were shameless and even beat me up. I had no choice but to run back. But previously, Brother Wang guarded the imperial city so strictly that no one was allowed to enter. I don't even know how I managed to survive these past 10 days. The old consort wiped her tears and said seriously, "This time, you're already in. Can he still chase you out?" "That's not necessarily true," Long Cheng's Ting Shui said aggrievedly. "I heard people outside say that royal brother went to pick up Gong Yimo. That bitch wants me dead. Furthermore, Brother Wang is so smitten by her that he might really kill me for her." Hearing that Gong Yimo was here, the old consort trembled. "Then what should we do?" Long Cheng's Ting Shui stammered. "Let's not talk about me. Mother, how are you doing in the imperial city?" The old consort sighed. "Not good. Your father is obsessed with the newbie and your brother doesn't care about me. I look forward to reuniting with you every day, but it's so difficult to see you." Hearing that, Long Cheng's Ting Shui cried even louder. "It's all because of our hard life as women. If it's me who ascends the throne, I won't bear to see mother suffer so much." The old consort was shocked. How can a woman be queen? Why can't a woman? Long Cheng's Ting Shui's voice was faint, making the old consort's heart turn cold. "Mother, if anything happens to brother and he doesn't have any children, I'll be the only one left. When I become queen, I promise father won't neglect you anymore." Long Cheng's Wuji was the old consort's child, so she was a little hesitant. Long Cheng's Ting Shui took out a packet of powder and said at the right time, "Mother, as long as brother drinks this, he'll fall into a deep sleep. When I become queen, I'll wake him up. He'll be fine." The old consort was still in a difficult position, but Long Cheng's Ting Shui was already crying. "Mother, royal brother is on guard against me now. I don't even have a chance to get close to him. Mother, if you don't help me and I'm sent back, those two disgusting men will kill me." The old princess consort's heart softened again when she saw Long Cheng's Ting Shui crying. For some reason, she actually took the packet of powder. Long Cheng's Ting Shui smiled through her tears. "Then I'll stay here with mother from now on. If Brother Wang comes back and wants to drive me away, mother must protect me." With that, she ran away with a smile, not giving the old princess a chance to regret. Gong Yimo was speechless. This Ting Shui of Long Cheng's ambition was not small. She actually wanted to be Lu Ye's queen. And if she became the queen, would she treat the old princess well? Gong Yimo didn't miss her last gloomy smile. She was afraid that the old Wang Fei still didn't know that she had worked so hard to let someone in behind her son's back. Gong Yimo followed Long Cheng Ting Shui to her place. "How's it going over there? Caught?" At this time, Long Cheng's Ting Shui's voice was cold, without the slightest bit of grievance. One of her subordinates said respectfully, "The situation over there is still unclear. A bunch of trash. You have to be so cautious to catch a woman." Long Cheng's Ting Shui curled her lips into a smile. "Forget it. Now go use the goo poison to bring in more people. When Brother Wang comes back, I'll catch him off guard." Gong Yimo's pupils shrank when she heard the word goo poison. It seemed that Long Cheng's Ting Shui sneaked in this time and brought a lot of goo poison. She didn't expect that she would mix with the remnants of the Shui clan. So, the person she wanted to catch was Shuelian. Her subordinates followed the order and Gong Yimo hurriedly followed. She couldn't let Long Cheng's Ting Shui succeed, so she had to make the first move. After Gong Yimo went out, she directly knocked that person out. She snatched the packet of medicine from his hand. Since she had nothing to do, Gong Yimo ran back to see if she could hear any more news. In the end, she ran back and found that Long Cheng's Ting Shui and another guard she brought were rolling together. The scene was extremely erotic. Gong Yimo decided not to look. She was pregnant, What would she do if she got a needle eye? At this time, they seemed to have enjoyed themselves to their heart's content. Long Cheng's Ting Shui said with satisfaction, "My dead husband really has eyes but can't see. He's indifferent to a great beauty like me and likes a man instead." That guard said fawningly, "Weren't they both killed by you? I'm sure they must be regretting going against you." Gong Yimo was shocked. She didn't expect that after not seeing each other for more than a year, Long Cheng's Ting Shui had become so powerful. She actually killed those two people and ran back. That guard said with some confusion, "Now you're the queen of our small country. Why do you still come to Luyi to take the risk?" He was very confused because he didn't understand Long Cheng's expanding ambition. "Queen? My place is considered a country?" Long Cheng's Ting Shui sneered, "Only a big country like Lu Yi can be considered a country. I'm Lu Ye's princess. Why should I hide in that small place? Long Cheng's Wuji owes me. My good parents owe me. I want to get them back one by one. When the goo poison spreads, when I have enough puppets in my hands, I want Long Cheng's Wuji to die in front of his subjects. I also want my good parents to enjoy life and become the lowest horse servants." Gong Yimo was speechless. The old Wang Fei and the old king Lu Yi didn't do anything wrong to Long Cheng's Ting Shui. But when Long Cheng's Ting Shui's mind was twisted, she didn't even let her own parents off. There's also Gong Yimo. Gong Yimo could hear the sound of her gnashing her teeth on the roof. "I want Gong Yimo to become a prostitute for Lu Ye's lowest horse grooms." Those people are used to being beaten and scolded. They love to torment women in bed. Let Gong Yimo enjoy it. As for her man, I'll take over. Hearing this, Gong Yimo didn't want to listen anymore. This woman was completely twisted by hatred. First, she didn't have a goo in her body. Second, she wasn't controlled by anyone, but she was still willing to work for the other party. It was obvious that there was a deal. Gong Yimo's eyes turned and suddenly had an idea. When Long Cheng's Ting Shui found out that the person who poisoned her was gone and she couldn't poison again, she would definitely think of a way to contact the mastermind. At that time, wouldn't she be able to catch the mastermind? Below, the guard had already retreated. Gong Yimo was also preparing to leave, but she saw Long Cheng's Ting Shui take out a jade bottle. A goo crawled out of it. She hesitated for a moment and grabbed the goo with her fingers. Gong Yimo's eyesight was very good. She recognized that this was the mother goo of the same heart goo. Long Cheng's Ting Shui hesitated for a moment. She suddenly raised her head and swallowed the mother goo. At that moment, Gong Yimo's hair stood on end. She suddenly felt that this woman was terrifying. Long Cheng's Ting Shui also didn't feel good. After she ate it, her face was as white as snow. But she looked at the child goo that was still sleeping in the bottle and smiled faintly. "Gong Dai, wait for me." Chapter 724. At that moment, Gong Yimo was stunned. A chill ran down her spine to her brain. She even had the urge to kill Long Chengding Shui. But when she thought that she needed her to find the mastermind, she swallowed her anger and turned to leave. Gong Dai's side was surrounded by people. Long Chengting Wuji led people to chase after the remaining wolves. A large group of women in white suddenly appeared. Each of them had a cold expression, as if they were emotionless puppets. Some of them were bulging, and it was unknown what they were hiding. That evil energy made Gong Dai's side more than 100 people on guard. Gong Dai looked at them and narrowed his eyes slightly. The other party had come to his side. It could be seen that Royal Sister was temporarily safe. Thinking of this, he relaxed a lot. The woman in the lead did not talk nonsense. With a sharp whistle, someone took off the medicine bag tied to her body, lit the fuse and threw it over. Although Gong Ju didn't know what they threw at him, he was certain that it wasn't anything good. So Gong Dai directly used his inner strength to materialize and swept all the medicine bags together with a gust of wind. Then, before they were about to explode, they were all torn apart. The wind brought about by the materialization of inner strength was like a blade. The powder formed a circle around them and finally all rushed towards the other party. But it was obvious that the other party had taken the antidote. The powder only made them feel uncomfortable for a while before they raised their swords and rushed over. More than 10 people rushed towards Gong Dai at the same time. They cooperated very well. More than 10 people together should be able to reach the 6th level of wind and nature. Gong Dai was once again glad that Royal Sister had gone to King City. There would not be many people like the other party. With him here, Royal Sister would be safe. These people were very powerful, but they were still not enough to deal with Gong Dai. But at this moment, there was a neigh. The carriage that Shuelian was in suddenly moved. The horse rushed forward like crazy. In the chaos, Gong Dai wanted to kill the horse with his sword, but suddenly a woman rushed out and blocked the sword for herself. Bang! Bang bang! At the same time, a series of explosions could be heard. It turned out that there were a few women who also had medicine bags tied to their bodies. They were fighting in close combat while igniting the fuses. However, the sound of the explosion was not as violent as the sound of gunfire. Instead, it was like the sound of fireworks. Powder exploded from their bodies. It spread to the crowd. Gong Dai flew to stop the carriage, ignoring these people. As the powder spread out, everyone fell to the ground. Si Wuyin was just about to move when he was held hostage by a woman with a sword. At this time, Gong Dai also jumped to the top of the carriage and killed the crazy horse with one slash. The carriage tilted forward involuntarily due to inertia and was about to overturn. Gong Dai stood at the top of the carriage and kicked backwards, causing his feet to sink. Due to the pressure, the 4 wheels bounced off at the same time. But the body of the car remained intact and pressed against the ground, stirring up a cloud of dust. Shuelian's soft cry came from inside the carriage, but she was obviously fine. On the other hand, Gong Dai waved his sword and stopped at the top of the carriage. He turned around and looked coldly at the remaining 100 or so people. A gust of wind blew past, and his robe fluttered, stirring up waves of killing intent. The leader of the group was heavily injured. She was extremely unwilling to accept this. She believed that the 12 of them had the strength to fight against Gong Dai. Furthermore, with the people and medicine she brought, they would not lose even against the 3,000 cavalrymen of Dragon City's Limitless. However, she had so many people and medicine. She had even ordered the wolves to disperse their forces. In the end, when faced with Gong Dai's 100 or so people, she could not even last a single round. The 100 or so people that had collapsed were nothing. What was terrifying was Gong Dai himself. If it wasn't for him rushing to stop the horses, all 12 of them would have been dead by now. It seemed like he did not use much strength when killing the wolves. Only when they attacked Shuelian did he reveal his strength. And this strength made them feel like they were facing a mountain god. They had no way to retaliate. Don't move. Hand over Shuelian. Otherwise, I will kill him. With Si Wuyin being held hostage, Gong Dai's cold face turned even gloomier. Now that the others had been drugged, the 1,000 elites he brought from Dai Yu State were still helping Yuheng. Gong Dai believed that he could kill all of them, but Si Wuyin gritted his teeth. Don't worry about me. Shuelian cannot fall into their hands. As soon as he said this, a bloody wound appeared on his neck. This made Gong Dai frown. He could not die. Otherwise, Royal Sister would be sad. How could he protect him and kill the others when he was being held hostage? Gong Dai took a deep breath and slowly closed his eyes. All this time, he knew that his foundation was unstable after forcefully breaking through to the 8th tier. Therefore, he rarely used his full strength, afraid of the backlash. But now, the ground suddenly trembled slightly. This sudden tremor caused the remaining 100 or so women to involuntarily gather together. They felt as if Mount Tai was pressing down on them. The danger was everywhere. Therefore, they did not know where to guard against. Gong Dai smiled gently. In the firelight, his face became more three-dimensional. One side was lit, and the other side was shadowed. Although his eyes were closed, it was as if he could see all their fear. What was going on? Where did this murderous aura come from? Could it be that Gong Dai still wanted to attack? Did he not care about the lives of the people in his hands? The leader of the women wanted to say something, but she felt a murderous aura coming from behind. When she turned around, a stone pierced through her forehead. Ah! Amidst the screams, Si Wuyin felt the blade on his neck loosen. Before he could react, screams rang out one after another. It was as if an invisible circle had surrounded them. There was no wind, but from the slight tremors, they could clearly feel that there was a wind raging. With people dying one after another, these women could not help but look at the man on the roof. At this moment, Gong Dai's silver-gray hair was dancing wildly. His hands were apart, palms facing each other. As his robe fluttered, he looked like a mad demon. However, under such movements, the carriage under him was isolated from the tremors. Shuelian felt as if she was trapped in a whirlpool. However, because she was in the eye of the storm, although she felt the pressure, she was in the safest place. In the next second, when the women did not know what to do, they saw the stones on the ground slowly floating up. So that was just the appetizer? Under such a terrifying pressure, some people finally reacted and wanted to escape. However, when they rushed out, they were forced back by the invisible wind. They were in the eye of the storm, like turtles in a jar. Some people were so flustered that they became even more daring. She shouted, "Stop, or I'll kill him." As she spoke, she pounced towards Si Wuyin. Her movement seemed to have triggered some kind of switch. Si Wuyin's scalp went numb when she heard the sound of floating stones sinking into her flesh. It was the sound of the floating stones sinking into her flesh. Chapter 725. Then, he watched helplessly as the people who were pouncing at him suddenly froze in place. One by one, they fell to the ground with an unwilling look on their faces. There was not much blood left, and they did not even have the time to make a sound before the stones came flying at them from all directions. They were extremely fast. They turned them into sieves. Si Wuyin stared with widened eyes as he circled around in a daze. More than 100 people reacted from time to time and collapsed to the ground. After he finished circling around, he was the only person left standing in the encirclement. This was the strength of someone close to the transcendent realm? Si Wuyin swallowed a mouthful of saliva as he looked up at the man who was slowly opening his eyes. He was only 18 years old, but even Gong Yimo did not know what kind of monster she had raised. It was only because he had never truly indulged himself that everyone felt that he was strong, but they did not know how strong he was. Gong Dai slowly exhaled as his long hair no longer fluttered. Even the stones that were waiting to be shot fell to the ground. Shuelian trembled as she climbed out of the carriage. As for Gong Dai, he jumped off the carriage roof. When he landed, his body swayed unnoticeably. "Are you all right?" Si Wuyin felt the murderous aura around him dissipate as the encirclement disappeared. He hurriedly went forward to take his pulse and realized that this attack had drained most of Gong Dai's inner strength. Gong Dai pulled back his hand and said coldly, "You should wake up the people on the ground. This king is fine." For some reason, Si Wuyin felt that he was very different from usual when he looked at him. Although he was cold and did not know what was good for him, and he was also arrogant, he did not make people hate him. Si Wuyin could not describe it because he did not know of a word called Sundara. With this doubt in mind, he obediently went to check on the people on the ground. When he realized that they were only temporarily unconscious, Si Wuyin heaved a sigh of relief. He took out some medicine and mixed it with water before giving it to them one by one. As for Gong Dai, he sat cross-legged on the ground as he adjusted his breathing. Shuelian stood to the side. At this moment, she felt that she was very incompetent. She couldn't do anything well. Moreover, her son-in-law was really strong and gentle. Just now, at that critical moment, because he promised his daughter that he would protect her, he immediately rushed over to kill Crazy Horse. After Crazy Horse died, the carriage tilted, and she almost fell over, but she felt a gentle force protecting her, preventing her from hitting the carriage head-on. In the next second, the carriage was pushed to the ground by him, and the wheels broke, but she didn't suffer much from the impact. Chapter 726. Gong Yimo was hugged by him and kissed until she was dizzy. Even though he didn't kiss her deeply and only licked and bit her, she was completely covered by his cold taste and felt as if she had been swallowed by him. Do you still want to talk? At this moment, his voice was low and gentle no matter how one looked at it. Gong Yimo blinked and looked at him in high spirits. More. These two words suddenly made Gong Dai's eyes seem to be on fire. He hugged her tightly and bit her until she couldn't make any other sound other than moaning. Gong Yimo couldn't help but hit him. You're squashing the child. Gong Dai quickly wanted to let go when he heard that, but at this moment, the child in her stomach suddenly kicked. It was really a kick, and Gong Dai could feel it through his clothes. Thus, the two adults were stunned. Actually, in the past month, the child in her stomach had moved many times, but this was the first time it was so obvious. And it was also the first time Gong Dai felt that the little life was protesting against him. At that moment, he suddenly had an extremely strange feeling. He hugged Gong Yimo and didn't dare to move at all. After a long time, Gong Yimo's stomach didn't move again. Gong Dai was a little disappointed, so he lowered his voice and asked, "Why isn't he moving?" Seeing that he asked a stupid question without realizing it, Gong Yimo smiled gently. Maybe you didn't squash him. Gong Dai was a little conflicted when he heard that. On one hand, he wanted to hug his wife tightly and let the child kick him again, but on the other hand, he was afraid that it wouldn't be good to squash him. Then the next time he moves, you must tell me. Gong Yimo looked at his serious face and couldn't help but laugh. Gong Dai, are you nervous? No. Gong Dai said very seriously. He was the great regent. It was just a child, so he wasn't nervous. Gong Yimo was charmed by his cuteness and couldn't help but lean over and bite his lips. What should I do? You're so cute that I just want to eat you up. Gong Dai looked like he was struggling. No, I have to control myself. TSK. I wonder who was the one who didn't control himself before. What if I do? Gong Yimo squinted her eyes and teased him. She wanted to see how strong Gong Dai's willpower was. Gong Dai suddenly stopped struggling. I'll be gentle. As he spoke, he flipped Gong Yimo over so that her back was facing him. This position made Gong Yimo blush. I was just teasing you. Are you serious? Gong Dai pursed his lips. I won't reject any request from royal sister. But that impatient action clearly showed that he couldn't hold it in any longer. Gong Yimo gritted her teeth with a red face. You're too much. I don't want to play anymore. Go to sleep. As she spoke, she wanted to turn over and sleep, but Gong Dai forcefully stopped her. She maintained her ambiguous position with her back nestled in his embrace. He whispered in her ear. Royal sister once said that women love to say the opposite. If you say that I'm too much, it means that I'm not too much. If you say that you don't want to play anymore, it means that you want to continue. So I've decided to satisfy you. As he spoke, he tore off her clothes under her body. Gong Yimo let out a soft cry, then covered her mouth with both hands and gritted her teeth. Can't you be a little quieter? Mother and Si Wuyan are just next door. Gong Dai raised his eyebrows slightly. Whether they find out or not depends on your little mouth. Royal sister. I'm coming. Gong Yimo groaned and bit the blanket in her mouth. Under the blanket, she was letting Gong Dai do whatever he wanted. Gong Dai frowned and moved a little. Suddenly, he leaned forward and whispered in her ear. Royal sister, you're too tight. For the sake of the child, I have to do it personally. Gong Yimo shrank into the blanket. You beast. Once it started, it was out of control. Because Gong Yimo was biting the blanket and didn't make any sound, the outsiders thought that they were still resting and didn't call for lunch. In the afternoon, Gong Yimo was so sleepy that she begged like a kitten. Only then did Gong Dai gradually stop for the sake of the child. After helping Gong Yimo wash up, he also simply freshened up. Then, he hugged Gong Yimo, who was about to fall asleep, and asked sullenly, Royal elder sister, when will your husband be able to indulge himself? Gong Yimo heard this and glared at him tiredly. For the sake of the child, he was already so beastly even after restraining himself. When the child was born, how was she going to live? She suddenly had the urge to get pregnant for 2 or 3 years. Otherwise, her little body that wasn't even 19 years old wouldn't be able to stand a big bad wolf like Gong Dai. Gong Dai hugged her and couldn't help but kiss her a few more times sweetly before hugging her and the child to rest. He was really very restrained. Other than the first 2 times when he couldn't control himself, he hadn't eaten his fill since. He didn't dare to use too much force, let alone indulge himself. But when he thought of the child between them, he was satisfied. Gong Dai sighed with emotion. He never thought that one day he would become like this. In his heart, there was only his wife and child. There was only a small family and a small world. But why did he seem to be enjoying it so much? That happiness was something that no amount of power could exchange for. Gong Dai kissed Gong Yimo's sleeping little face again and hugged her to sleep with satisfaction. At Longqing Wuji's side, there was a huge argument. The old princess consort wanted her daughter to stay, but Longqing Wuji didn't allow Longqing Tingshui to stay. In the end, Longqing Tingshui could stay, but she couldn't leave the palace to avoid embarrassing herself. Longqing Tingshui cried and looked very obedient on the surface, but in her heart, she cursed Longqing Wuji. When Gong Yimo came, he welcomed her with joy. When she came, he begged her to stay. In the end, who was his sister? What was so good about Gong Yimo? Didn't she just bring Lu Ye's crops? What did it matter if those inferior people didn't have enough to eat and died? Didn't she just supervise the construction of the Three Kingdoms horse path? Why was everyone singing her praises? She didn't build it herself. What Longqing Tingshui didn't know was that Gong Yimo's greatest strength was that she could break the barriers between countries. She could easily make countries cooperate with each other without any grudges. It could be said that in any dynasty, there wouldn't be such a harmonious time. When Longqing Tingshui came out of the main hall, she bumped into Gong Yimo and Gong Dai. Gong Yimo's stomach deeply stimulated her. Wasn't Dai Yu State very strict about getting pregnant before marriage? Ordinary women should be dragged to the pig cage and drowned in it. Why? How could Gong Yimo be so glorious? How could there be such an outstanding man like Gong Dai? Gong Yimo was stunned for a moment when she saw her, but she didn't say anything. Gong Dai didn't even look at Longqing Tingshui. The royal sister said that this woman had feelings for him, which made Gong Dai instantly mark her as a key enemy in his heart. If it wasn't for the fact that he still needed her, he would have gotten rid of this hidden danger long ago. Chapter 727. But Longqing Tingshui didn't know it. She looked at Gong Dai coming. Her heart was full of desire. Now Gong Dai had become the ruler of Dai Yu State. Dai Yu State was such a rich country, but it belonged to this man. And this man's martial arts were strong. He didn't have any power, but he was also very handsome. That tall and straight posture, full of power and waste, made Longqing Tingshui a little thirsty. If Gong Dai was infected with the child goo, she would make him serve her on the bed every day, and everything he had would become hers. As if disgusted by Longqing Tingshui's strong desire, Gong Dai suddenly turned his head and looked at her coldly. That look was indescribably cold. Gong Yimo pulled him back, and he gave up the impulse to kill Longqing Tingshui. The royal sister was right. The most important thing now was to find the remnants of the Snow clan. He just had to endure. So Longqing Tingshui didn't know that in just a face-to-face, she almost died in the hands of Gong Dai. At the moment when they passed each other, Longqing Tingshui and Gong Yimo didn't talk, but the turbulence rose again, as if the horn of war was blown. Gong Yimo smiled gently and didn't want to pay attention to it. For a few days, Lu Yu was safe. First, the people sent by the sacred lake were all killed by Gong Dai, and no one reported back. Moreover, Longqing Tingshui's plot was interrupted because Gong Yimo came back early. Longqing Tingshui anxiously waited in the palace for a few days, but there was no news of missing people or unrest in the city. It was as if no one was poisoned at all. Could it be that the people sent out betrayed them? Longqing Tingshui was a little hesitant. After waiting for a week, she finally moved. This time, she only came back with 2 people. One was the person sent by the Snow clan, who was sent out without any news, and the other was her own person, who was also her favorite pet. You go out, go to the sacred lake and put this down. She took out an inconspicuous stone. This was the only way she could see the Snow Clan. When Longcheng Wuji found out, he didn't stop them. The martial law that should be enforced in the city was never relaxed. However, when Longcheng Ting Shui cried and begged him to let her people out to buy the freshest ice lotus, he pretended to be impatient and agreed, letting her guards out of the city. Gong Yimo didn't have any feelings about the upcoming war. She had been with Shuelian these days. She had been listening to her parenting tips. But when she was Shui's mother's, she was a mother, and she was face when she said some words. She was Shui's. She was Shui of est. Shuetes, Shui she, Shui est. Gong Yimo didn't say anything, but Shuelian's entourage couldn't stand it anymore and complained for Fuya. King has been very busy recently. He was helping the new clansman settle down and accidentally hurt his hand. That's why he didn't reply with many words. King told us not to say, because he was afraid you would be worried. Shuelian's face turned red. She glared at that person. You talk too much. That person smiled and left. The relationship between the two masters was so good. It was a blessing for them as subordinates. At this time, someone came over and whispered a few words in Gong Yimo's ear. Gong Yimo secretly smiled. It's here. The Snow Clan had used all kinds of methods to come and see Longcheng Ting Shui. They directly killed the person sent by Longcheng Ting Shui, took off his face, put it on, and then sneaked into King City. When Longcheng Ting Shui saw him, she was shocked. You killed him? That person smiled. Who told your good brother to keep a close eye on you? We couldn't sneak in, so we had to do this. Longcheng Ting Shui's face twisted for a while, but she didn't say anything in the end. The person you gave me was disobedient. I asked him to poison him, but he didn't come back. Because the other party was wearing someone else's face, he didn't have any expression. He said calmly. He was killed. Master sent news that the child Gu and his body died. Longcheng Ting Shui's face twisted for a moment. Who killed him? Tianlong City's Wuji went to pick him up. If nothing happens to King City, those generals won't meddle in other people's business. I don't know. The man's voice was a bit cold. I don't know who did it, and none of the people sent to intercept Gong Dai came back. Longcheng Ting Shui's eyes turned. You want to catch Gong Yimo's mother? That woman called Shuelian? She said with some bad intentions. If I can help you catch her, can you give me more of the same heart goo? Seeing the other party's scheme, the man sneered. No need. We already have a way to catch her, and it's foolproof. Longcheng Ting Shui's hopes were dashed, and she said angrily, Then what do we do now? The palace is too tight. My useless mother refused to poison Longcheng Wuji. Hearing this, the person smiled. I came for this. The poison must be used, and he leaned over and whispered into Longcheng Ting Shui's ear. Longcheng Ting Shui's eyes lit up. Gong Yimo couldn't hear clearly. She narrowed her eyes and was a little unhappy. After the two finished their discussion, Gong Yimo continued to guard Longcheng Ting Shui, while Gong Dai went with that person. As the saying goes, cast a long line to catch a big fish. If you want to know how big the fish is, you have to consider the fisherman's patience. Longcheng Ting Shui sat in the room for a while, then went to the old princess consort. She forced the old princess consort to poison her, but the old princess consort refused. She used the trump card that the person told her just now. Mother, I already know that Brother Wang isn't your son. She smiled deeply. Seeing the old princess consort pale in fright, she was even more pleased. If you don't poison him, your daughter will tell father that you had an affair with a guard with blue eyes in order to be promoted. That's why you had the chance to get pregnant and ascend the throne. What do you think father will do to you? She would be beaten to death. Thinking of the increasingly irritable old King Lu Yi, the old princess consort's eyes flickered. Go, mother. Brother Wang doesn't have the royal bloodline. He's just the son of a lowly guard and I'm your only child. The blood in my body is enough for me to ascend the throne. The old princess consort had no choice. Under coercion, she finally agreed. Gong Dai also found the other party's lair, but there was no one in the lair. They didn't make a move first. In the next few days, Long Chengting Shui began to act frequently. While she let the old princess consort sneak in, she met many ministers in private. Because they were all in the palace, Long Chengting Shui didn't care. Some people met her, but she rejected some. Every time he heard a servant report that Long Chengting Shui had hooked up with some minister in the garden, he felt disgusted. No wonder his personality was so different from Long Chengting Shui. It turned out that he wasn't her biological son. You're tuning in to the Romance Rendezvous YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.